The Synthesis Wizard. In a world where elements lay barren, and powerful wizards had abandoned their homeland a millennium ago to explore the multiverse, Sunan found himself reincarnated as a noble scion stripped of his title. This world, once brimming with magic and wonder, had fallen into a desolate state, and wizards had become mere legends. Sunan was acutely aware that after 1,000 years, the elements would awaken once more, heralding the return of the wizards and ushering in a new era of prosperity. He understood that his path was clear. He must train diligently to become a wizard himself and survive until this glorious age arrived. Chapter 1, The Synthesis Cube. Starlight Calendar Year 1248, Month of Autumn Twilight, October. Black Rock City, border of the Astral Duchy. The weather was gradually turning cooler. A few yellowed leaves danced in the wind, a reminder that the scorching summer was coming to an end. Old Geller, the butler, walked along the cobblestone path in the courtyard, tightening his collar against the chill. He held a wooden box carefully in his other hand. He crossed the courtyard and arrived at a secluded area. Frowning at the quiet and deserted yard, he couldn't understand why young Master Sunan had chosen to move here and instructed the servants to stay away. Sunan claimed to enjoy the peace, but wasn't this a bit too desolate? Ever since their father, Baron died in battle and the two young masters were essentially exiled to Black Rock City, young Master Sunan, who had always been introverted, became even more withdrawn. He spent all day either holed up in his room reading or tinkering with strange things. He even had young Master Kyi collect various herbs and small animals for him. His actions were a mystery to everyone. Fortunately, there was still young Master Kyi. Unlike Sunan, Kyi had been striving to improve himself since arriving in Black Rock City. At only 19, he was already a high-ranking knight, deeply admired by his subordinates. Having such a leader was a blessing for Black Rock City, which had long suffered from the raids and harassment of the black-scale lizards. Lost in thought, Geller reached the door of the innermost room and knocked gently. "Young Master Sunan, I've brought you the silver moon flowers. Just leave them at the door," a weak voice responded from inside. "Yes, young Master Sunan." Geller expertly placed the wooden box to the right of the door, bowed, and left the courtyard. A moment later, the door creaked open, and a thin, pale young man of about 16 or 17 emerged. He bent down, picked up the wooden box, and returned to his room, closing the door behind him. The room was sparsely furnished. Long tables lined the walls, covered with glass bottles and jars filled with strange ingredients. A large laboratory table dominated the center of the room, taking up almost half the space. It was cluttered with glass bottles, test tubes, beakers, and other tools. With the doors and windows tightly shut, the air was thick with a mixture of pungent, sweet scents, and the sharp smell of disinfectant. Sunan casually placed the wooden box on the table, picked up an unfinished book from the side, and continued reading intently. About half an hour later, he finished the last page and closed the book with a snap. At the same time, a line of text materialized in the air before him. Reading Fundamentals of Potionology, Potion Making Learning Progress plus 0.5%. Potion Making Learning Progress has reached 100%, acquired Potion Making LV1. Sunan exhaled slowly, a hint of joy flickering across his pale face. After more than 2 months of studying relevant books and countless hours spent practicing extraction and purification techniques, he had finally mastered the basics of potion making. Setting aside Fundamentals of Potionology, Sunan turned his attention to a box in the corner of the room. It contained more than 20 books. They were all wizarding texts collected by his predecessor. The book on top was bound in a hard, black cover. The front displayed a series of strange symbols like cryptic runes, their meaning indecipherable to most. But Sunan could understand what these symbols represented. Enlightenment. This was a primer for aspiring wizards. Those with magical aptitude could activate their spiritual powers by reading it, becoming a lowly first-level wizard apprentice and embarking on the path to seeking truth and power. Those without aptitude, however, risked coma or even death if they attempted to read it. His predecessor had recklessly tried to read this very book, leading to his demise and Sunan's subsequent transmigration into his body. To Sunan's surprise, the world he had arrived in was the same as a virtual reality game he had recently encountered in his previous life. The game was set in a vast continent where sword and magic reigned supreme. Sword referred to knights. Magic referred to wizards. Of course, this was still the early stage of the 1.0 version, Night War. 1,000 years ago, wizards had abandoned this continent, which was poor in elemental energy, and journeyed to the multiverse in search of more suitable realms. They would not return until 1,000 years later, when the elements of this continent would recover. Currently, the dominant force was the knights. It's a shame I only started playing in the 2.0 version, Return of the Wizards. I don't know much about the 1.0 version. Otherwise, having that information would make things much easier here, Sunan sighed. But as a transmigrator, he had his own advantages. With a thought, a translucent screen appeared before his eyes. Sunan Anist, human male, 16 years old. Spirit 1.5/Constitution 0.7. Skills. Star Ring Meditation LV1, 103/1000. Potion Making LV1, 0/1000. The Player Panel. This was one of the perks of his transmigration. The panel clearly displayed his current abilities. All skill learning was digitized, with progress bars showing his advancement. As long as he put in the effort, his skills would steadily improve. Consistent effort leads to steady progress. That's the player's advantage. With another thought, the screen flickered and transformed into a grid of 100 squares, 10 rows by 10. Synthesis Cube. This was his other cheat. Simply put, the synthesis cube could combine multiple items of the same kind, enhancing their quality, effects, or power. Sunan opened the wooden box Geller had brought. Inside, nestled on a bed of red velvet, were 10 small, delicate silver flowers. Silver moon flowers. They were known for their invigorating effects. Many nobles enjoyed brewing tea with silver moon flowers. A cup in the morning could banish drowsiness and leave one feeling refreshed. This was because silver moon flowers contained components that stimulated mental activity. By extracting and refining these components, their effects could be amplified. Sunan carried the box to the laboratory table in the center of the room, took out the silver moon flowers, and placed them in a beaker. Then, he lit the alcohol lamp beneath it. It's a pity I couldn't find any magic stones. A magic stone lamp would be much more efficient for potion making. In the 1.0 version of the game, the Starlight continent was an elemental wasteland, with a pitifully low concentration of energy particles in the air. As a result, resources were scarce compared to later eras, including magic stones. At this point in time, the Starlight continent simply didn't have the resources to support a true wizard. Fortunately, Sunan had the synthesis cube. Even without sufficient resources, he could find ways to synthesize them himself. He added some water to the beaker and covered it with a glass lid. The liquid quickly came to a boil under the heat, bubbling vigorously. Within minutes, the water turned a beautiful silver blue color, and steam billowed out from under the lid. A refreshing fragrance filled the room. Sunan inhaled gently, feeling instantly invigorated. After more than 10 minutes, the bubbling subsided, and the liquid in the beaker had reduced by more than half. Sunan picked up the beaker and examined it with satisfaction. He now had about 100 ml of silver moonflower extract. Successfully completed a drug purification and refining, potion making proficiency +1. Sunan divided the extract into 10 equal portions of 10 ml each. Then, he activated the synthesis cube and placed one portion into a square on the grid. Information about the extract appeared above the square. Silver moonflower extract, purity 37.12%, increases mental activity by 21.47% after consumption, duration 10 hours 35 minutes. Sunan placed the remaining 9 portions into the grid. The interface changed, and a larger square appeared on the right, containing a more vibrant, almost ethereal silver blue liquid. Silver moonflower essence, purity 76.44%, increases mental activity by 160.24% after consumption, duration 10 days 14 hours 22 minutes. This was clearly the synthesized product. The effects of regular silver moonflower extract wouldn't stack. Even 10 portions combined would only provide a 21.47% increase in mental activity for less than 5 days. But after being processed by the synthesis cube, both the effect and duration were significantly enhanced. This was the power of the synthesis cube. Sunan tilted his head back and swallowed the silver moonflower essence. As the potion took effect, his mind felt incredibly clear. Without wasting any time, he sat down cross-legged and began to meditate. Chapter 2, The Ethereal Legend. Every enlightenment book was essentially a meditation method. The Star Ring meditation was the meditation method that came with the enlightenment book that activated Sunan's spiritual power. The core of this method was to construct star rings in the mind. Each star ring constructed would significantly increase spiritual power. According to the description in the Enlightenment book, as long as one successfully constructed 3-star rings and reached 12 points of spiritual power, one could be promoted to a second-level wizard apprentice. As Sunan closed his eyes, his vision instantly fell into darkness, his consciousness sinking like a stone dropped into a lake, gradually descending to the silent bottom. A dazzling starlight slowly emerged from the darkness, gradually growing into a ring. However, most of this ring appeared illusory, with only about 1/10 being substantial. During the meditation, light spots continuously flashed around Sunan, merging into his body and filling the illusory part of the star ring. After an unknown amount of time, Sunan suddenly opened his eyes and woke up. Looking at his pocket watch, almost 2 hours had passed. On the panel, the star ring meditation proficiency had increased by 5 points, and his spiritual power had also increased by 0.01. The meditation time was the same 2 hours, but the gains were about 2.5 times that of usual. This is the benefit of increased mental activity. A smile appeared on Sunan's face. Just then, footsteps suddenly came from outside the door, followed by a knock. "Young Master Sunan, Master Kyi has returned and asked you to go to the training ground." Sunan came back to his senses and said lightly, "I understand." Black Rock City was built on a mountain. To guard against the black scale lizards, the city walls were exceptionally tall and strong, with towers all around. From a distance, it looked like a ferocious beast entrenched in the mountains. In the very center of the city stood a vast inner castle. Unlike the crucial city walls, the inner castle had not been repaired for many years and looked somewhat dilapidated. Only the training ground was flat and open, showing that it had been expanded not long ago, revealing the martial spirit of its owner. Sunan walked into the training ground and saw his elder brother Kyi standing at the edge of the field, surrounded by 7 or 8 strong men in armor. These were the only knights in Black Rock City, and the last of the forces left by their father, Barren, that were loyal to the Flashing family. The physique of a formal knight is above 8, and a high-ranking knight like my brother can even reach above 14. Compared to these superhuman existences, my body is simply pitifully weak. Looking at his physique of only 0.7, which was even worse than that of an ordinary person, Sunan couldn't help but sigh inwardly. His predecessor was born weak and frail. Although he had also practiced breathing techniques, he made almost no progress and was not cut out to be a knight. He had lived under the halo of his elder brother Kyi all his life. Although he didn't say it, he was actually very unwilling in his heart. Otherwise, he wouldn't have pinned his hopes on the ethereal legend of wizards, and ended up losing his life instead. Although there were many wizard books left on this continent, ordinary people couldn't understand the words on them, so people mostly regarded these books as a kind of antique worth collecting. Wizards had also become legendary, mostly appearing in ancient tales. "Brother," Sunan called out. Kyi turned around and looked at his younger brother, a smile appearing on his sculpted, firm face. "You came just in time. I've got what you wanted." The surrounding knights bowed to Sunan. Sunan's gaze turned to the cart beside them. There were more than 10 corpses placed on it. These corpses were covered with black scales, with eagle claw-like hands, protruding mouths, and sharp fangs. Even though they were dead, they still exuded a fierce and ferocious aura. They were the sworn enemies of Black Rock City. The black scale lizards. These demi-humans lived in the wildlands dozens of kilometers away. They did not produce anything and only knew how to plunder. Every year, they would invade the villages around Black Rock City to loot and kill, making them deeply hated. Most of the time, the Black Rock City Guard was dispatched to deal with these bandits. "Please have someone carry these to my lab, brother." "No problem." Kyi summoned a soldier and gave the order, then turned to Sunan, hesitated for a moment, and couldn't help but ask, "Can you really find a way to improve the army's combat power with just these black-scale lizard corpses?" Sunan smiled slightly and said, "Even if I told you now, you wouldn't believe me. It's better to wait until I show you the results, then you won't have any doubts." Kyi sighed, "I'm not doubting you, but the legends about wizards are ethereal. Whether they are true or not has not been determined yet, so I don't have much confidence." Sunan laughed, "Anyway, it's just a dozen black-scale lizard corpses. It's not a big loss even if we lose them." Kyi nodded and didn't say anything more. Half a year ago, their father died unexpectedly on the battlefield. The cause of his death was a mystery. Their uncle, Owen, with the support of Marquis Goldenrock, took the opportunity to seize the title of Baron Flashing and took over most of the Flashing territory. If it weren't for fear of appearing too greedy, and the ambiguous attitude of the other 3 lords of Flashing territory, Owen would probably have killed them both instead of finding an excuse to exile them to Black Rock City. Even so, the threat from Owen was still a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. It could fall at any moment and take their lives. Therefore, Kyi desperately practiced and tried his best to strengthen the power of Black Rock City. So much so that he even held a glimmer of hope for the so-called wizard methods. Even though deep down he wasn't optimistic about it. Listening to the conversation between the brothers, many of the surrounding knights showed disapproval. They didn't believe that there was anything in the black scale lizards that could make them stronger. It wasn't like no one had tried lizard meat before, and it didn't make them stronger. The meat was also very unpalatable. Seeing the changes in everyone's expressions, Sunan secretly sighed. The people of this world simply didn't understand how powerful wizards were. Knights and wizards were like martial artists and immortals, there was simply no comparison. Even the most powerful legendary knight in the Astral Duchy was just a slightly larger ant in front of a formal wizard, easily crushed. Shaking his head, Sunan didn't bother to explain. He said a few words to Kyi and turned to leave the training ground. Returning to his courtyard, Sunan went straight to the basement. This was the laboratory he had people clean up, specifically for his biomodification research. Among the pile of books left by his predecessor, apart from the Enlightenment book and a few spell model books, the rest were all related to biomodification and potion making. Including biology, mutation studies, bloodline extraction, anatomy, neurology, fundamentals of potionology, magical plant cultivation. It was by relying on these books, coupled with some practical operation, that Sunan successfully filled up the learning progress of potion making and mastered this skill. In addition, the learning progress of another skill, biomodification, had also exceeded 50%. It was estimated that it would be successfully filled up in another month or 2. However, to master other skills or spells, I still need to collect more wizard books. This was also one of the reasons why Sunan boasted in front of his brother. Only by making others realize the power of wizard methods would they be more dedicated to helping him collect various resources. Otherwise, even for the sake of brotherhood, even if his brother was willing to continue spending a lot of manpower and material resources to help him collect resources, the knights under his command would be full of complaints and not put in any real effort. For the past 2 months, Sunan had been busy with this matter. He had painstakingly mastered potion making in preparation for his next move. Glancing at the pile of more than 10 lizard corpses in the corner, he took out a compendium of zero-order potions from the cabinet and turned to page 284. The page was filled with dense text and complex patterns. The first line at the top was a few bold black words. Dragon Blood Potion. Chapter 3, Inferior Dragon Blood Potion. Among the many wizard potions, the Dragon Blood Potion was a very special one. Its effect was to strengthen the human body's constitution. It was even effective for formal knights. The reason it was said to be special was that the upper and lower limits of the Dragon Blood Potion could vary greatly. Low-quality Dragon Blood Potions didn't even have a rank and could only be considered zero-order potions. But high-quality Dragon Blood Potions could even reach the third-order level, something that even formal wizards would be tempted by. And the rank of a Dragon Blood Potion mainly depended on the quality of its main ingredient, Dragon Blood. The higher the quality of the Dragon Blood, the better the effect of the potion made, and naturally the higher the rank. However, let alone true Dragon Blood, even the blood of a slightly stronger sub-dragon species was something Sunan currently had no way of obtaining. But there were substitutes. The ancestors of the black scale lizards were descendants of the dragon race tens of thousands of years ago, and their bodies contained dragon blood. Although passed down to this day, the dragon bloodline in the black scale lizards had been diluted to the extreme, but it still contained the blood of the giant dragon. Sunan's goal was to extract dragon blood that met the material standards of the dragon blood potion from the blood of the black scale lizards. Patting his cheeks, Sunan roused himself and prepared to start working. However, just the first step of carrying the heavy lizard corpses onto the operating table left him panting. Once I make the dragon blood potion, I must take it myself first and improve my physique. After calming his breathing, Sunan picked up the scalpel and began to dissect and draw blood. These black scale lizards had just died not long ago, and their corpses had been preserved with medicine, so the blood in their bodies had not yet coagulated, making the blood drawing process very smooth. After spending more than an hour extracting all the lizard blood, Sunan began the bloodline extraction process. Completed a blood purification, biomodification learning progress plus 0.01%. Completed a blood refining, biomodification learning progress plus 0.01%. Completed a bloodline extraction, biomodification learning progress plus 0.03%. After multiple purifications and refining, a whole bucket of blood was eventually reduced to just over 3 liters. Looking at the scarlet blood in the glass, thick like jelly, Sunan's eyes flickered slightly. Dragon lizard blood, purity 35.68%. Blood containing the dragon lizard bloodline. After being injected into the human body, there is a very small probability of mutating into a dragon lizard body, and a very high probability of rejection. Severe cases can lead to death. The stronger the physique, the higher the success rate of mutation and the lower the rejection. With my current technology, this is the limit of what I can refine. Sunan sighed. Bloodline extraction and refining were part of biomodification. He hadn't even mastered the biomodification skill yet, so his technology was naturally limited. Fortunately, he still had the synthesis cube, his cheat. Making one dragon blood potion requires 80 ml of dragon blood. Sunan separated 2 80 ml portions of dragon lizard blood and put them into the cube. The corresponding information quickly appeared on the synthesis interface. Dragon lizard blood, purity 51.59%. Blood containing the dragon lizard bloodline. After being injected into the human body, there is a small probability of mutating into a dragon lizard body, and a high probability of rejection. Severe cases can lead to death. The stronger the physique, the higher the success rate of mutation and the lower the rejection. Not enough. Sunan continued to add more dragon lizard blood. The purity of the synthesized product continued to increase, but the increase became smaller and smaller. It wasn't until the 8th portion of dragon lizard blood was added that the information on the synthesized product finally changed qualitatively. Sub-dragon blood, purity 1.12%. Blood containing the dragon bloodline. After being injected into the human body, there is a very small probability of mutating into a sub-dragon body, and a very high probability of rejection. Severe cases can lead to death. The stronger the physique, the higher the success rate of mutation and the lower the rejection. Finally succeeded. A joyful smile appeared on Sunan's face. Sub-dragon blood was the minimum standard material for refining dragon blood potion. Considering that this was his first time making the potion, and the failure rate might be a bit high, Sunan decided to prepare a few more portions of materials and didn't continue synthesizing. In the end, more than 3 liters of black-scale lizard blood were synthesized into a total of 5 portions of sub-dragon blood. Sunan did not immediately start making the potion, but instead meditated for a while to restore his energy to its peak state before starting his first potion-making attempt. The most important ingredient in the dragon blood potion was dragon blood. The other materials were not difficult to find, and Sunan had already prepared them. He lit the alcohol lamp, placed the beaker, then added water and added the materials in order. The whole process was similar to refining the silver moon flower, but there was an extra step at the end. Under the bright candlelight, Sunan flicked his finger, and a blue-violet halo instantly submerged into the beaker. At the same time, his lips moved slightly, and he uttered a series of strange syllables, sometimes sharp and high-pitched, sometimes low and weak. And with his voice, the bright red liquid in the beaker also changed into various shapes. The production of a real potion, even a zero-order potion, required spiritual power as a guide, otherwise it would definitely fail. This was the reason why wizard potions were mysterious and powerful. After more than 10 minutes, the bright red liquid gradually calmed down, and its volume slowly decreased. But at a certain moment, the liquid suddenly boiled violently again, emitting a lot of green smoke. After a bang, it turned into a mass of black powder. Completed a potion making, failed, potion making proficiency +4. Even a failed potion making gives much more proficiency than extracting silver moon flower. There was no frustration on Sunan's face. He hadn't expected to succeed in his first attempt at making the potion. After resting for a while, Sunan continued with his second potion-making attempt. However, this time it still ended in failure. The subsequent third potion-making also failed. Sunan summarized the experience of the 3 failures and finally succeeded in his 4th attempt. Completed a potion-making proficiency +12. Inferior Dragon Blood Potion, 0 order/inferior, after taking it, it can strengthen the physique. The specific strengthening range depends on the physique of the user. The weaker the physique, the stronger the effect. Repeated use will weaken the effect. Just an inferior dragon blood potion. Well, after all, the purity of the sub-dragon blood was too low. It's already very good that I could make it successfully. Without a second thought, Sunan poured the potion into his mouth. The moment the potion entered his stomach, a heat flow suddenly exploded, instantly surging through his limbs and bones. Sunan only felt as if his whole body was immersed in hot magma, with severe pain but also a hint of undeniable pleasure. It took a full 4 or 5 minutes for the severe pain to slowly dissipate. Sunan was drenched in sweat, as if he had just been fished out of the water, his clothes soaked through. But at this moment, he felt full of energy, as if he had endless strength, and there was no longer the feeling of weakness and fatigue he had before. Taking off his shirt, Sunan looked down at his body. His originally thin body, where his ribs could be clearly seen, had now become much stronger. Pressing his abdomen lightly, he could clearly feel the abdominal muscles under the shallow fat. Clenching his fist, the muscles in his arm immediately became prominent. Sunan opened the panel and was surprised to find that his physique had changed from 0.7 to 2.6. An increase of 1.9. A physique of 2.6 is almost equivalent to that of an apprentice knight who has trained for 4 or 5 years. Sunan was filled with amazement. One potion had turned him from a weak ordinary person into a powerful apprentice knight. This was the power of wizard potions. And this was just a low-grade zero-order potion. If it were a ranked dragon blood potion, it might be able to directly promote an ordinary person to a knight. Ranked potions are still too far away for me. Now, having the inferior dragon blood potion is enough to get the job done. Chapter 4, The Magical and Fearsome Power of Wizards. The 5th potion-making attempt failed, using up Sunan's last batch of sub-dragon blood. But he didn't mind. He didn't need to show a physical product, he himself was the best proof. After a good night's sleep, Sunan found Kyi in the council hall the next day. Kyi had just returned from a patrol, still wearing his armor, looking dusty and weary. He sat in the hall with a group of knight commanders, discussing how to deal with the black-scale lizard invasion. In previous years, the black-scale lizards would invade during the Frost's Descent month to steal food for the winter. It's about that time again. Scouts discovered traces of the black-scale lizards more than 10 kilometers north of the city yesterday. Those damned bandits! They never learn. Sir, give me 100-man squad, and I'll take care of those bandits. Kyi frowned. Black Rock City was just a small city with a total force of only a little over 500 men. More than half of them were militiamen who had only received basic training and had never seen real blood. They were fine for defending the city, but if they were to fight the black-scale lizards in the open, they would probably collapse in an instant. The only real fighting force was the 250 or so soldiers. This small force was stretched thin, having to defend Black Rock City and the many surrounding villages. Thinking of this, Kyi couldn't help but have a headache. Besides Owen, the black-scale lizards were another threat he had to deal with. If he didn't handle it properly, Black Rock City would have a difficult winter. Just as he was having a headache, Kyi caught sight of Sunan walking in from the corner of his eye. He raised his hand to signal his subordinates to stop talking and looked at Sunan. "What's the matter?" Sunan said, "I succeeded." Kyi was stunned for a moment before he realized what Sunan meant. He asked doubtfully, "Did you find a way to increase the strength of the army?" The others also reacted at this time, all looking at Sunan. But their eyes were filled with obvious doubt. He had only been researching for a day, and he had already found a feasible solution? This sounded too good to be true. Facing everyone's doubtful gazes, Sunan didn't waste any words. He went straight to a long table, grabbed the edge of the table with one hand, and lifted it with force. There was a creaking sound as the heavy table was lifted off the ground, hovering steadily about 20 centimeters in the air without any shaking. Everyone looked at this scene in astonishment, their eyes almost popping out. It was common knowledge that Sunan was in poor health and usually couldn't even lift a long sword. But now he could easily lift a table made of solid wood, weighing at least 200 or 300 pounds, and it seemed effortless. This strength was probably no less than that of an apprentice knight. Coming back to his senses, Kyi abruptly stood up, looking at his younger brother with surprise. "What's going on?" Sunan put down the table, smiled and nodded, explaining, "I've created a potion that can strengthen the human body. I took one myself, and my current physique is roughly equivalent to that of an apprentice knight. The weaker the user's physique, the stronger the effect of the potion. It's also effective for formal nights and can be taken multiple times, but the effect will gradually weaken. I'll need to collect more data to analyze more specific information. As he listened to Sunan's words, Kyi's eyes grew brighter and brighter. According to this, with enough potions, they could mass-produce apprentice knights, or even knights. If an ordinary person could become an apprentice knight after taking the potion, wouldn't an apprentice knight be very likely to be promoted to a formal knight? Kyi's face flushed with excitement. Those who weren't lords simply didn't know how difficult it was to train a knight these days. An ordinary person would start practicing skills and toughening their bodies from the age of 12. On average, it would take 4 or 5 years to train their physique to the point where they could practice breathing techniques and thus be promoted to a knight squire. And a knight squire generally had to practice breathing techniques for 4 or 5 years before being promoted to an apprentice knight. Then, it would take another 7 or 8 years of training to condense a life seed and be promoted to a formal knight. In total, it would take an average of 17 or 18 years to train a knight. And this was only if they had sufficient aptitude. Those with poor aptitude might never become knights in their lifetime. In addition, the manpower and material resources consumed during the training process were also a huge expense. Therefore, even powerful nobles with territories often couldn't train too many knights. Take Flashing Territory as an example. Even at its peak, the total number of knights in the territory did not exceed 100. This showed how precious a potion that could produce knights in a short time was. Taking a few deep breaths, Kyi calmed his excitement, stared at Sunan, and asked solemnly, "What do you need me to do?" Sunan said seriously, "Making this potion requires a large amount of black-scale lizard blood." "No problem." Kyi agreed without hesitation, "I'll lead the army out of the city to hunt black-scale lizards tomorrow." After a pause, he quickly came to Sunan, patted his shoulder with a gratified expression, and said, "I didn't expect the legendary wizard methods to be real. I was wrong to doubt you before. I apologize to you." Sunan smiled slightly, "We're family, no need to worry about that." Kyi's smile became even brighter, and he nodded vigorously, "Well said. As long as we brothers work together, we will definitely be able to take back Flashing Territory and avenge our father one day." Sunan nodded seriously, but his heart remained calm. With the goal of becoming a wizard, he had no interest in conquering the world. He just wanted to quietly cultivate, pursue longevity, and live until the elemental recovery and the golden age of wizards 1,000 years later. Although this was what he thought in his heart, he still had to put on an act in front of his elder brother. After all, wizard cultivation required a lot of resources, and having a lord as a brother made collecting resources more convenient and faster. Therefore, Sunan's goal was very clear. On the one hand, he would find ways to increase the strength of the territory, making it a logistics platform for collecting resources for him. On the other hand, he would cultivate and improve his strength, striving to be promoted to a formal wizard as soon as possible. On the other side, the commanders also recovered from their shock and looked at each other. None of them expected the legendary wizard methods to be real. To be able to turn an ordinary person into an apprentice knight in just one day, such methods were simply magical and fearsome. For a moment, everyone looked at Sunan with amazement and awe. And then came intense joy. With such a magical potion, the territory could be strengthened. Therefore, when Kyi issued the order to go out of the city to hunt black-scale lizards tomorrow, all the commanders responded excitedly. They had never wanted to see those damned bandits so much. The black-scale lizards, whom they used to hate so much, had now become walking Precii. Us potions in their eyes. They were all capital for becoming stronger. Chapter 5, Spell Models. Early the next morning, Kyi led his troops out of the city in a flurry, embarking on a grand hunt for the black-scale lizards. Sunan, as always, remained in his room, engrossed in his own pursuits. In the tightly closed study, the bright yellow candlelight flickered and danced. Sunan sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed. After about 2 hours, he finished meditating and opened his eyes. On the panel, the proficiency of the star ring meditation technique increased by another 5 points. His spiritual power also increased by 0.01. At this rate, it will take about half a year to construct the first star ring. Sunan's eyes flickered slightly. According to the description in the Enlightenment book, without external assistance, it would take most wizard apprentices 2 to 3 years to construct the first star ring. Wizard apprentices with outstanding aptitude could shorten this time to about a year. From this point of view, even excluding the enhancement effect of the silver moonflower essence, his aptitude was considered quite outstanding. After all, in most games, players with data panels were all peerless geniuses compared to the natives. However, Sunan was still not satisfied. It would take more than half a year to construct the first star ring, and the second and third star rings would only take longer. In total, it would probably take 3 or 4 years to be promoted to a second-level wizard apprentice. Wouldn't it take 10 or 20 years to be promoted to a third-level wizard apprentice? What about being promoted to a formal wizard? Hundreds of years? It was important to know that the lifespan of a wizard apprentice was not much longer than that of an ordinary person. Without physical modification, it would not exceed 200 years at most. Only by being promoted to a wizard and breaking through the shackles, could one's life essence be sublimated and one's lifespan be greatly increased. Sunan's goal was to be promoted to a wizard before his lifespan ran out, so that he could live to see the elemental recovery 1,000 years later. I still need to further improve the efficiency of meditation. Sunan got up and went to the bookshelf, taking out the Compendium of Zero-Order Potions. This book recorded a total of 18 zero-order potion formulas. In addition to the Dragon Blood Potion, there were also Brute Force Potion, Healing Potion, Swiftness Potion, Light Perception Potion, and so on. Among them, the one that interested Sunan the most was a zero-order potion called the Inferior Activity Potion. The effect of this potion was similar to that of the Silver Moon Flower Essence, both increasing mental activity, but the effect was much stronger than the latter, and it could be considered an upgraded version of the Silver Moon Flower Essence. If I had the Inferior Activity Potion to assist with meditation, I could be promoted to a second-level wizard apprentice in a year or 2 at most. Sunan's heart was filled with excitement. However, when he saw the materials needed to make the Inferior Activity Potion, his excitement cooled down. Although materials like the pure heart grass, dragon eye mint, and black spotted python bone powder were precious, as long as he was willing to spend time, he could always find them. But the sap of the mind-clearing tree was a headache. In Sunan's limited game memory, it seemed that the mind-clearing tree only existed in the territory of the Azure Gold Empire in the south. Thousands of kilometers away, there was no way for him to obtain the sap of the mind-clearing tree. I can only try to see if I can use the Silver Moon Flower Essence as a substitute. The main function of the mind-clearing tree sap was to increase mental activity, similar to the Silver Moon Flower Essence. Using the Silver Moon Flower Essence as a substitute had a high feasibility. The key was that the Silver Moon Flower was not a particularly precious item. 1 silver coin could buy 1 flower. However, whether it was feasible or not would have to wait until the other materials were collected before further experimentation. In addition, among the zero-order potions, the Inferior Activity Potion was also one of the most difficult to make. Sunan estimated that he would need at least level 2 potion making to be able to make it. Otherwise, the success rate would definitely be ridiculously low. I'll use the Inferior Dragon Blood Potion to increase my proficiency for now. When the materials are collected, my potion making should be almost level 2, and then I can experiment. Sunan put down the Compendium of Zero-Order Potions and took out a few spell model books from the cabinet. There were only 4 types of spell models left by his predecessor. They were Mage Hand, Acid Splash, Sleep Curse, and Flash. All of them were the lowest level zero-ring spells. But they also happened to fit Sunan's current situation. If it were a first-ring spell, it would be basically impossible for him to master it with his current spiritual power. Sunan opened the pages, which were filled with dense text and various complex and profound models. Spell models were the foundation of mastering spells. To cast a spell, one needed to first weave the corresponding spell model with spiritual power, and then use the model to mobilize energy particles and release them in a special way, which was the so-called spell. Simply put, a spell model was a CPU processor that converted energy particles into various spells. However, this processor was extremely precise and complex, and the dense spell circuits and spell nodes were enough to make one's scalp tingle. Even the simplest zero-ring spell model was far more complex than ordinary people could imagine. And each spell model involved several subjects. Take Mage Hand as an example. It involved energy circulation and force field energy conversion. To master Mage Hand, one also had to find books related to these 2 subjects, study them, and integrate them. Therefore, the time it took for a wizard apprentice to learn a spell was often measured in years. However, Sunan, with his cheats, was an exception. With his player panel, he didn't need to understand the knowledge in the books, nor did he need to master the prerequisite knowledge. As long as he read the spell books, he could increase the learning progress of the spell. even if he couldn't understand it at all. Similarly, he didn't need to painstakingly construct complex spell models in his mind. As long as the learning progress was filled up, he could instantly master the spell, and the related knowledge involved would also be instantly integrated. This was the advantage of being a player. Opening the spell model book for Mage Hand, Sunan began to read attentively. About half an hour later, a line of text slowly appeared in front of him. Reading Mage Hand Spell Model, Mage Hand Learning Progress plus 0.08%. In the following days, Sunan spent his time meditating and reading spell books every day. Occasionally, he would take time to deal with the black scale lizard corpses sent by Kyi, drawing blood and making inferior dragon blood potions. As his skill proficiency increased, his potion-making skills became more and more proficient, and his success rate gradually increased. Later on, he could make one inferior dragon blood potion with an average of 3 portions of sub-dragon blood. Half a month later, he had accumulated 11 inferior dragon blood potions. When Kyi returned to the council hall of the inner castle of Blackrock City, dusty and weary, he saw Sunan and the potions neatly arranged on the table. "Are these the potions you mentioned that can enhance physique?" Kyi picked up a potion and looked at the bright red liquid shaking in the transparent glass bottle, his face filled with amazement. The surrounding knights also craned their necks to look at the potions on the table, their eyes burning with eagerness. After all, according to Sunan, these potions were also effective for formal knights. Who didn't want to become stronger? Chapter 6, Knowledge is Power. "These are all the potions I've made recently. I'll leave them to you to distribute, brother," Sunan said. "Thank you for your hard work," Kyi exclaimed, giving Sunan a hearty pat on the shoulder. His eyes gleamed with excitement as he surveyed the row of potions. He paused, then asked, "What's the effect of this potion on high-ranking knights?" "It's very limited," Sunan replied without hesitation. "It can probably only increase the physique of a high-ranking knight by 1 to 2%. Is that so?" Kyi's face fell slightly. It seemed a waste to use such a precious potion on himself. After a moment of contemplation, he turned and called out, "Horden." "Yes, sir." A knight stepped forward, a look of eager anticipation on his face. Kyi picked up a potion and tossed it to Horden. "Drink it." Without a moment's hesitation, Horden uncorked the bottle and downed the crimson liquid in one gulp. Almost instantly, his skin flushed red, veins bulging, his face contorted in a grimace of pain. The agony was short-lived, however. Within 2 minutes, Horden's body returned to normal, leaving him panting and drenched in sweat, yet his eyes shone with exhilaration. "Incredible! I feel so much stronger, and my reflexes are quicker too," Horden exclaimed, flexing his arms and legs. Sunan observed this with a knowing nod. The inferior dragon blood potion should increase a primary knight's physique by 0.7 to 0.9 points. Considering that a primary knight's physique ranged from 8 to 10, this was a significant enhancement. For a high-ranking knight, the increase would be around 0.2 to 0.3 points. This was merely a low-grade, zero-order inferior dragon blood potion. As his potion-making skills and the quality of ingredients improved, he could create even more potent versions. The other knights, witnessing Horden's transformation, were practically drooling with desire as they stared at the potions. A wide grin spread across Kyi's face. "Go and fetch Nelson, Cardi, Norden, all of them," he ordered. He rattled off 7 names in total. These were the apprentice knights who had remained loyal to him and Sunan after their father's death. They were the core of his fighting force, and it was only natural to prioritize them. A knight immediately dashed off to relay the command. The remaining knights, though momentarily disappointed, quickly composed themselves. They understood that using the potions on apprentice knights, potentially turning them into full-fledged knights, would benefit Blackrock City far more than a slight increase in their own strength. Especially now, with the looming threat of the black-scale lizard invasion, even 3 or 4 extra knights would make a huge difference. Soon, the 7 apprentice knights arrived. After taking the inferior dragon blood potion, 3 of them successfully condensed their life seeds and became formal knights on the spot. The remaining 4, though not yet breaking through, were clearly on the cusp of knighthood. All 7 were flushed with excitement. After commending them, Kyi swept his gaze across the room, his expression turning stern. "These potions are of utmost importance. Without my permission, no one here is to breathe a word of their existence to anyone. Disobedience will be met with severe punishment." A wave of seriousness swept over the room, and the knights responded with a resounding yes, sir. They were not fools, they understood the implications of these potions. If their treacherous uncle in Flashing City learned of the inferior dragon blood potion, he would undoubtedly attack Blackrock City without hesitation, never allowing them to grow strong enough to challenge his rule. Sunan, who had been about to reiterate the importance of secrecy, decided it was unnecessary. He pulled out a list and handed it to Kyi. Brother, please help me gather these materials. The more, the better. And wizard books, please keep an eye out for those as well. No problem, Kyi agreed without hesitation. Having witnessed the wondrous effects of the inferior dragon blood potion, he harbored no doubts about the power of wizardry. He was more than happy to fulfill his younger brother's requests, eager for him to continue his research and create even more potent potions. As the Frost's Descent month deepened, the weather grew increasingly bitter, casting a chill over Blackrock City. Militiamen huddled behind the battlements atop the city walls, their breath misting in the frigid air. They rubbed their hands together for warmth, occasionally peering out into the distance. Suddenly, one of them straightened up, his eyes widening as he spotted something in the distance. Scout cavalry approaching. They're coming from Castle Village. He shouted. Several militiamen hastily lowered a basket over the wall to receive the incoming rider. Moments later, the piercing clang of alarm bells echoed through Blackrock City. Everyone heard the sound. In his study, Sunan looked up, a flicker of anticipation in his eyes. The bell, the black scale lizards are finally here. Since the previous month, Blackrock City had been preparing for the inevitable invasion. Residents of distant villages had been brought within the city walls, while soldiers were stationed in the closer ones. Kyi, clad in his armor, remained within the city, ready to lead his troops against the invaders at a moment's notice. In previous years, a heavy dread would have hung over Blackrock City at this time. The black-scale lizard invasion always brought significant losses, casualties, destroyed buildings, trampled fields. It would take an entire spring to recover. The war against the lizards was a losing battle, whether they won or lost, Blackrock City always suffered. This year, however, was different. The inferior dragon blood potion had transformed the black-scale lizards from a scourge into a resource. Their blood was now the fuel for strengthening Blackrock City's forces. Every lizard slain brought them closer to becoming stronger. Blackrock City finally had the means to turn war into an opportunity for growth. The invasion was no longer a disaster, but a chance to gain strength. With enough lizard corpses, they could create a large number of apprentice knights and even knights. Driven by this prospect, the army's morale and enthusiasm were at an all-time high. Sunan could practically see the knight commanders charging into battle with ferocious glee. Just a single zero-order potion has turned the tide for Blackrock City. Knowledge truly is power. Sunan's eyes gleamed as he returned his attention to the book before him. On the slightly yellowed page, the first line was written in small black letters. Wisdom is the true source of a wizard's power. Chapter 7, The Combat Strength of a Wizard Apprentice. At the end of the Frost's Descent month, November, the first snow fell, blanketing Blackrock City in a pristine white. On this same day, Sunan's Mage Hand learning progress finally reached 100%. Mage Hand learning progress has reached 100%, acquired Mage Hand. A surge of information flowed into his mind. Sunan closed his eyes to process it, then opened them, focusing on a book on his desk. He uttered a series of strange syllables. As the incantation left his lips, the book quivered, then gently rose into the air. It followed his gaze, floating effortlessly left and right, up and down. Mage Hand allowed him to manipulate objects at a distance, making them float and move according to his will. It appeared as if an invisible hand was at work. Among the many zero-ring spells, Mage Hand was one of the most versatile. It could be used in experiments, potion making, or even combat, saving effort and allowing for precise manipulation. The range and weight limit depended on the caster's skill and spiritual power. This practicality was the reason Sunan chose Mage Hand as his first spell. With it, handling potions and extracting lizard blood would become much easier. Which spell should I learn next? He wondered. With a thought, 3 spell books floated out from the bookshelf and landed on his desk: Acid Splash, Sleep Curse, and Flash. The effects of these spells were self-explanatory. After a moment of deliberation, Sunan decided to learn Sleep Curse. To advance his biomodification skill, he often experimented on small animals. Sleep Curse would make this process much more convenient. With the black scale lizards in retreat, there was no urgent need for him to learn offensive spells. In truth, the combat strength of a level 1 wizard apprentice was generally not that formidable. Initially, a level 1 apprentice was simply someone with stronger spiritual power than ordinary people, able to draw in energy particles from the surroundings and store them within their body as mana. Later, as they meditated and increased their spiritual power, their body would be gradually strengthened by the subtle influence of these energy particles. At this stage, a level 1 wizard apprentice was not much stronger than an apprentice knight. They had slightly more spell resistance, but were still far inferior to a formal knight. Only after mastering 2 or 3 offensive spells could a level 1 wizard apprentice be considered to have true combat power, capable of fighting a formal knight. This situation would persist until they were promoted to a level 2 wizard apprentice. A level 2 apprentice could control energy particles, significantly enhancing their physique. Combined with spells, they could even challenge peak knights, and only great knights could stand against them. Moreover, level 2 apprentices could contract magical pets and use magic items. A level 2 apprentice with a magical pet and combat magic items was a force to be reckoned with, even for a great knight. This was where the true gap between wizard apprentices and knights became evident. Putting aside these thoughts, Sunan picked up the Sleep Curse and began to read. Reading Sleep Curse Spell Model, Sleep Curse Learning Progress plus 0.08%. Reading Sleep Curse Spell Model, Sleep Curse Learning Progress plus 0.08%. Time flew by. Following the Frost's Descent month, the harshest month of the year, the month of slumber, December, also passed. On the 5th to last day of December, the black scale lizards finally retreated through the snow, battered and defeated. The 2-month-long war was over. After a 5-day respite, Black Rock City welcomed the first day of the winter harp month, January, of the starlight calendar year 1249. This was the new year of the Astral Duchy. The cold wind howled, but it couldn't dampen the joyous atmosphere within the city. Houses were adorned with colorful decorations, and children dashed through the streets, their laughter echoing despite their rosy cheeks. In the banquet hall of the inner castle, young maids bustled about, carrying platters laden with fragrant hams, cheeses, dried fruits, and fine wines. Knights gathered around the tables, their boisterous laughter and conversation filling the hall. Old Geller, overseeing the servants, observed the scene with a touch of emotion. In past years, the losses caused by the black scale lizards had left the former lord and the commanders with no energy for New Year festivities. This year, however, was different. According to Knight Horden, they had decisively defeated the lizard bandits, driving them back to their lair before the first snow even fell. The surrounding villages had suffered minimal losses. Grateful for this, the serfs had sent various agricultural products to the inner castle on this first day of the new year. But what puzzled old Geller was that he kept hearing that this was all thanks to young Master Sunan. The knights he knew all spoke highly of Sunan, their voices filled with respect. This left old Geller baffled. Having lived in Black Rock City for decades, he could sense a positive change taking place, but he couldn't quite grasp its source. Lord Kyi and Master Sunan have arrived. A sudden exclamation echoed through the hall. The hall fell silent, and everyone turned to look at the entrance. Kyi and Sunan walked in, side by side. Both were dressed in their finest attire, their faces, sharing a strong resemblance, were equally handsome. Kyi, the elder brother, was tall and powerfully built, his muscles sculpted and defined like a statue. Sunan, the younger brother, though still on the slender side, no longer appeared frail. He exuded an air of quiet confidence. His eyes, in particular, were striking deep and bright, they held a gaze that was hard to meet. The arrival of the two brothers immediately captured everyone's attention. Lord Kyi. Master Sunan. The knights bowed in greeting. Their address for Sunan had changed from young master to master, a sign of their newfound respect. Kyi strode to the front of the crowd and raised his glass. Thank you all for your hard work last year. Tonight, let us enjoy this feast and celebrate. The knights erupted in cheers, their voices almost raising the roof. Sunan quietly observed the scene, picked up a glass of fruit wine from the table, and took a sip. After more than 2 months of being nourished by energy particles, his physique had now increased to 2.79, almost reaching the peak of an apprentice knight. And because he could absorb energy particles, he didn't have the same increased appetite as other apprentice knights, who needed to consume large amounts of food to replenish the energy expended in training. If needed, he could even go for months without eating. Now, he ate more for enjoyment than necessity. Just as Sunan finished his fruit wine, Kyi came to his side. "Why aren't you celebrating with the others?" "I prefer a bit of quiet," Sunan replied. Kyi, understanding his brother's introverted nature, simply smiled. "I have good news. I found the things you wanted. They should have been delivered to your courtyard by now." Chapter 8, The Inferior Activity Potion. Sunan wasn't particularly interested in the banquet in the first place. Now that he knew the items he had been longing for had arrived, he had even less desire to stay. After exchanging a few words with Kyi, he left the banquet hall and returned to his courtyard. As soon as he entered, he saw 2 boxes placed in the courtyard. He cast Mage Hand, moving the boxes into his study, and then opened them to examine their contents carefully. One box contained more than 10 books. The dark, hard covers were adorned with intricate and irregular lines, forming words that only wizards, or apprentices, could understand. Touch of Fatigue, Detect Poison, Unlocking Technique, Charm Human, Shield Technique, Alien Life Analysis, Necromantic Rebirth, Principles of Negative Energy. Among the 12 books, in addition to 5 spell model books, the rest were on various specialized subjects. And among the 5 spells, Charm Human and Shield Technique were both first ring spells. First ring spells. Sunan's eyes lit up. Charm Human and Shield Technique were both very practical first ring spells. Especially Shield Technique, it was a life-saving spell that almost every wizard apprentice had to learn. Unfortunately, to learn first ring spells, one's spiritual power had to reach at least 10 points. He was still far from that. Although the wizards abandoned this world, they left behind many books, magic items, and even legacies. These things are useless to ordinary people, they can't even understand them, but to wizard apprentices, they are precious treasures. A smile appeared on Sunan's face. As long as one was willing to spend time and had enough financial resources, any wizard apprentice could actually gather enough knowledge in this world to be promoted to a formal wizard. Of course, resources were another matter. Although he couldn't learn the 2 first ring spells for now, the 3 0-ring spells were not a problem. Sunan put away the spell books, planning to study them slowly later. Then, he flipped through the remaining specialized knowledge books one by one, but unfortunately, none of them triggered any corresponding skills. Apparently, this knowledge was not classified as skills. "I'll keep them and read them slowly when I have time, it's good to increase my knowledge." Sunan was slightly disappointed. He put away the books and then opened the other box. The box was filled with small boxes of various sizes. Sunan opened them one by one. As expected, the boxes were filled with various well-preserved materials. Pure heart grass, dragon eye mint, black spotted python bone powder, these are all materials for making the inferior activity potion. In the end, after counting, all the materials for making the inferior activity potion were complete, except for the mind-clearing tree sap. And the quantity was quite large, enough to make the potion 40 or 50 times. With so many materials, it should be enough for me to develop a new version of the inferior activity potion. Sunan couldn't wait. He took the materials and went straight to the laboratory. The progress bar of the star ring meditation technique was already more than halfway full. With the help of the inferior activity potion, it wouldn't be long before he could construct the first star ring. Arriving at the laboratory, Sunan lit the candles and went straight to the long table filled with beakers and test tubes. In the past 3 months or so, he had made the inferior dragon blood potion at least 200 times, and his potion making had already reached LV2, which was more than enough for zero-order potion experiments. Therefore, in the following days, in addition to meditation and spell learning, Sunan had another task, potion experimentation. He continuously synthesized silver moon flower essence of different purities and volumes, experimenting with its compatibility with other materials, and exploring the best ratio for it to serve as a substitute. Starlight Calendar Year 1249, Month of Revival, February. As the black scale lizards completely retreated to their lair in the Redhorn Wilderness, Black Rock City, free from threats, became completely leisurely. Kyi shifted his focus back to managing the territory. Because Black Rock City was located in the south and had a warmer climate, the snow began to melt at the beginning of the month. It was expected that by the spring dawn month, March, they would be able to start sowing and plowing. Kyi had already ordered the militiamen to build irrigation canals in the territory to bring in river water in preparation for the agricultural work in the spring dawn month. With the irrigation from the river, it was foreseeable that this year's harvest would be good. In addition, KYI also called on the serfs in the territory to fish in the river during their free time, which was a way to increase the territory's income. After the war with the black scale lizards, the strength of Black Rock City's army did not decrease but increased. Under the effect of the inferior dragon blood potion, the number of knights increased from the original 9 to 21. And this number was expected to continue to grow in the next 2 months, until the accumulated black scale lizard blood was used up. This led to a sharp increase in the territory's meat consumption. After all, a knight with an open stomach could eat 30 or 40 pounds of meat a day. Black Rock City's cattle and sheep alone could not support this, so they could only try to find a solution through fishing. However, fishing could only slightly alleviate the food problem. KYI had to spend money to purchase a large amount of meat from other cities. In addition, his younger brother's research was also a huge expense. The batch of antiques and materials last month alone cost dozens of gold coins, almost equivalent to Black Rock City's monthly tax revenue. It made KYI feel as if his heart was bleeding. However, considering the long-term development of the territory, Sunan's research funding definitely couldn't be cut off. In order to increase revenue and reduce expenditure, KYI, as the Lord, had been worrying a lot lately. Sunan, who was shut in the laboratory and focused on researching potions, was unaware of this. Mid-month of revival. After unremitting experimental efforts and research, Sunan finally made the first bottle of Inferior Activity Potion. Inferior Activity Potion, 0 order/inferior, after taking it, it can increase mental activity, duration 15 days and 4 hours, no effect when stacked. Finally completed. Looking at the beautiful silver blue liquid in the potion bottle, Sunan breathed a sigh of relief. With the synthesis cube, he could precisely control the refreshing effect of the silver moonflower essence, making its effect infinitely close to that of the mind-clearing tree sap, to the extent that it could be used as a substitute. The entire experimental process was actually just constantly adjusting the ratio of materials, and it went very smoothly. That was why Sunan was able to make the new version of the Inferior Activity Potion so quickly. Without hesitation, he immediately drank the potion and sat down on the spot to start meditating. A cool, minty sensation suddenly spread from his abdomen, quickly spreading throughout his body. Sunan instantly felt as if he was immersed in the cool bottom of a lake, with an indescribable sense of peace. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly opened his eyes, his whole being radiant. This was the positive effect brought about by the small increase in spiritual power in a short period of time. Sunan immediately opened his personal panel. Sunan Anist, human male, 16 years old. Spirit 2.82/Physique 2.94. Skills. Star Ring Meditation LV1, 750/1000. Potion Making LV2, 289/3000. Spiritual power increased by 0.03, Star Ring Meditation Proficiency increased by 25 points. Sunan was overjoyed. This efficiency was almost 5 times that of before. As expected, the effect of the potion is much better than that of pure plant essence. Sunan was extremely happy. At this rate, he would be able to construct the first star ring in 10 days. Chapter 9, The Black Rock Mine. 10 days later. In the meditation room, Sunan sat cross-legged on the floor. Invisible to the naked eye, countless energy particles swarmed towards him as if pulled by an unseen force, eagerly merging into his body. Deep within his sea of consciousness, the majority of the star ring had materialized, leaving only a tiny portion still shimmering with an ethereal quality. As the energy particles continued to pour in, this last vestige of illusion steadily vanished. The moment the final trace solidified, the entire star ring suddenly burst with brilliant light, vibrating gently. A clear ringing resonated within Sunan's mind, and his consciousness felt incredibly sharp. Success! Sunan opened his eyes, a genuine smile of joy spreading across his face. It had been almost half a year since he began cultivating the star ring meditation, and he had finally constructed his first star ring. Snapping out of his elation, he immediately checked his panel. Spirit 3.60/Physique 3.25. My spirit increased by 0.78, and my physique by 0.31. Sunan nodded in satisfaction. Even with the aid of the Inferior Activity Potion, it had still taken him nearly a month of meditation to achieve this increase in spiritual power. The boost from constructing the star ring was truly significant. His physique now surpassed that of an apprentice knight, though it was still far from the 8 points required for a formal knight. After all, he hadn't practiced any breathing techniques. If I start practicing breathing techniques now, my progress shouldn't be slow. Breathing techniques and physique complemented each other. Faster progress in breathing techniques led to faster physique enhancement, and vice versa. With his current physique, he might be able to master the basics of a breathing technique in less than a month. However, despite this, he didn't plan to do so. Wizards had plenty of ways to strengthen their physique, there was no need to waste time and energy on breathing techniques. He'd rather spend that effort increasing his proficiency in spells or skills. Sunan opened his spell list. Mage Hand. Sleep Curse. Acid Splash. Flash. Thanks to the inferior activity potion, his spell learning efficiency had increased several times over. In just 2 months, he had not only mastered Sleep Curse but also learned Acid Splash and Flash. He was currently working on unlocking technique. Most of the knowledge involved in wizardry is incredibly profound and takes a lot of time to master. This is the main reason why many wizard apprentices with good aptitude take hundreds of years to be promoted to wizards. However, with sufficient resources, this time can be greatly shortened. Sunan sighed inwardly. The Starlight continent had been abandoned precisely because of its dwindling elements and scarce resources, leaving wizards with no hope of increasing their power. If he didn't have the synthesis cube, it would be a pipe dream to be promoted to a wizard on the current Starlight continent. Upgrading to level 2 Star Ring Meditation requires 3,000 proficiency points, which will take about 4 months. If I can maintain a continuous supply of the inferior activity potion, I can be promoted to a level 2 wizard apprentice in 2 years at most. Sunan estimated that the cost of making 1 bottle of inferior activity potion was about 12 gold coins. Later, when he became more proficient, it should be reduced to about 10 gold coins. That would be 20 gold coins a month. It seems that the monthly tax revenue of Blackrock City is only 40 or 50 gold coins. This is not a small expense. Sunan had thought about synthesizing the inferior activity potion, which might significantly improve the potion's effect. Unfortunately, with Blackrock City's current income level, he couldn't afford to purchase a large amount of materials at once to make enough inferior activity potions for synthesis. I'll have to discuss it with my brother. Sunan got up and left the meditation room. He encountered old Geller on the way and learned that Kyi was currently in the study, so he turned and headed straight there. However, when he found Kyi in the study, he found the latter sighing and looking troubled. Seeing Sunan, Kyi put on a brave face and asked, "Oh, it's you, Sunan. You've been cooped up in your courtyard for days, why did you decide to come out today?" "Brother, I have something to discuss with you." Sunan got straight to the point and brought up the matter of buying materials. Upon hearing this, Kyi smiled wryly. "There are still more than 50 gold coins in the account. I originally planned to use them to purchase armor, but since you need them, I'll give them to you first." Sunan glanced at Kyi and, recalling his worried look earlier, immediately understood. Is the territory short of money now? Kyi didn't hide it and sighed. Recently, the number of knights in the territory has increased a lot, and the expenditure on food has increased significantly. Next month, we will start farming again, and we need to spend money to buy tools and seeds. The expenses are indeed quite high. Is there any way to increase revenue and reduce expenditure? Reducing expenditure is not an option. If the territory wants to develop, it's impossible to save money. Whether it's arming the army or developing the economy, it can't be done without gold coins. Kyi had always had the idea of strengthening his forces and taking back flashing territory, so naturally, he wouldn't be content with just muddling along. As for increasing revenue, I do have an idea. I plan to reopen the Blackrock mine. Blackrock mine? Sunan's expression shifted slightly. He remembered that Blackrock City was once famous for producing Blackrock iron. Blackrock iron was a high-quality metal that, with simple refining, had a hardness comparable to that of refined iron, making it a good material for forging armor and weapons. The name Blackrock City also came from this. It was precisely because of Blackrock iron that Blackrock City became one of the most prosperous cities in Golden Rock Province. But then something happened that caused the Blackrock mine to be abandoned, and Blackrock City gradually declined. Speaking of which, why was the Blackrock mine abandoned in the first place? Sunan asked curiously. Without a special reason, the successive lords of Blackrock City would never give up a cash cow that could continuously produce gold coins. According to the old soldiers in the city, it was because a kind of monster appeared in the mining area. Monster. Kyi was prepared. He took out a piece of parchment and spread it out on the table. It depicted a pitch-black panther, but its body clearly showed the texture of stone and emitted a metallic luster, making it look like a creature completely made of metal and stone. The previous lord called this monster an iron-swallowing beast. They feed on black rock iron ore, and their bodies are as hard as black rock iron. Each one has a combat power comparable to that of a primary knight, making them very difficult to deal with. Are there many of these monsters? Sunan asked. Although knight-level monsters were fearsome, they shouldn't be enough to deter successive lords. If all else failed, they could just spend a few hundred gold coins to hire a great knight to deal with them. Unless the number of monsters was extremely large, or there were other reasons. Sure enough, KYI continued, the number of monsters is not large, estimated to be only 20 or 30. The key is that the iron-swallowing beasts are very cunning. Once they sense danger, they will burrow into the rock walls and escape. They are very fast, and even a great knight can't stop them. If these monsters are not cleared out, the mining area cannot operate normally. A monster that can burrow into the ground. Sunan raised his eyebrows. This was indeed difficult to deal with. Of course, only for ordinary people. If that's all, there might be a solution. KYI was stunned by Sunan's words. It took him a while to react before he stood up in surprise. Do you have a way to deal with the iron-swallowing beasts? Sunan pondered, we can try. Although Sunan didn't give a 100% guarantee, it was enough to make KYI ecstatic. The thing that had been bothering him most lately was the gold coin issue. If they could reopen the Black Rock mine, all the problems would be solved. Chapter 10, So this is a wizard? The Black Rock mine was located southwest of Black Rock City. It consisted of more than a dozen mining sites and covered a vast area. The shallow veins had been exhausted, leaving the surrounding mountain walls carved into a concave valley. Looking inward from the valley entrance, one saw a vast expanse of reddish-gray and lead-black rocks. The valley was littered with mining carts and rails, evidence of the resources invested by the former lord. However, decades had passed, and the place was now a desolate ruin, the carts and rails rusted and covered in dust. KYI and Sunan stood at the valley entrance, surveying the scene. Behind them were more than a dozen knights and 100 soldiers. Due to the importance of the Black Rock mine, KYI had mobilized nearly half of Black Rock City's forces. Of course, ordinary soldiers wouldn't play a major role in this operation. Their task was to guard the retreat route and provide logistical support. The true fighting force consisted of Sunan, KYI, and the knights. Are you sure about this? Horton muttered, glancing at the dark entrance to the mine with a worried look. I heard from the old soldiers that those iron-swallowing beasts are very strong. Are we taking too much of a risk with just this few people? The other knights exchanged uneasy glances. To be honest, they were all surprised when Lord KYI announced his plan to clear the iron-swallowing beasts from the Black Rock mine. Everyone in Black Rock City knew about the mine and the rumors surrounding it. It was said that several previous lords had tried to deal with the iron-swallowing beasts, but they all failed, suffering significant losses. Over time, no one dared to attempt it again. No one expected KYI to suddenly decide to reopen the mine. If Master Sunan hadn't claimed to have a solution, they would have voiced their objections. Even so, many of them were still apprehensive. Horton, if you continue to undermine morale, I'll forbid you from drinking for a month when we get back, KYI warned, glaring at him. Horton shrank back, falling silent. He loved all kinds of wine and spirits, forbidding him from drinking was akin to torture. Seeing Horton subdued, KYI turned back to the mine entrance, his own heart filled with uncertainty. After all, he had never seen an iron-swallowing beast himself. If these monsters were even more terrifying than the old soldiers described, they would be in trouble. However, glancing at Sunan beside him, KYI chose to trust his brother, masking his worries. Sunan touched the scale armor he wore. It was the only piece of scale armor in Black Rock City, more valuable than a full set of refined iron armor. It originally belonged to KYI, but KYI, fearing for his brother's safety, insisted that Sunan wear it. He even gave him a long sword. Although Sunan's swordsmanship was terrible, it was better than nothing. Let's go. With KYI's order, everyone lit their torches and filed into the mine, leaving the soldiers to guard the entrance. The shallow veins of the Black Rock mine had long been exhausted. Later, several deep shafts were dug to mine the deeper layers. The shafts crisscrossed beneath the rock layers, and every few hundred meters, an oil lamp hung on the wall. However, the oil within had long since evaporated. A knight stepped forward with a leather pouch, refilling and lighting the lamps. Soon, a series of flames illuminated the tunnels, casting long shadows that outlined the winding paths, guiding them forward. As they ventured deeper, they slowed their pace. The tunnels were uneven, and the dim light made it easy to stumble and injure themselves. Although they were all knights with strong bodies, no one wanted to fall flat on their faces. A silence hung in the air, broken only by their footsteps and breathing. The cold, desolate tunnels held no sign of life. An ordinary person traveling alone in such a place would be filled with instinctive dread. After walking further, the surrounding rock walls finally changed. A knight held his torch close to the wall, revealing a layer of dark, cold black coating the surface. "Black rock iron ore!" Horton exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. Everyone recognized it. They immediately became more alert. Further ahead lay the unmined ore veins. It was likely here that the miners had encountered the iron-swallowing beasts, forcing them to abandon their work. This meant they would soon encounter their targets. Their prediction proved correct. After advancing 400 or 500 meters, they heard a rustling sound coming from ahead, as if something was crawling on the ground. "Alert! Prepare for battle!" Kyi ordered in a low voice. Everyone raised their weapons, their expressions grim as they stared into the darkness. Soon, feline shapes emerged from the shadows. They stepped gracefully into the torchlight, their grey, gemstone-like eyes fixed on the intruders. Iron-swallowing beasts. Exactly as depicted in the portrait Sunan had seen. More and more beasts emerged from the darkness, quickly exceeding 10 in number. Beyond the reach of the torchlight, several pairs of gleaming eyes flickered. The iron-swallowing beasts formed a loose semicircle, surrounding them. "These beasts are quite ambitious. It seems they want to keep us all here," Knight Brad muttered, tightening his grip on his massive steel shield. He was the strongest knight in Black Rock City after Kyi, just a step away from being promoted to a high-ranking knight. Standing 2 meters tall and skilled in shield techniques, he was a renowned warrior on the battlefield. Seeing the iron-swallowing beasts up close, Brad sensed that their aura did not exceed that of a primary knight, and he relaxed slightly. It would be a good thing if that's the case. "I'm afraid these beasts will run away." Kyi also noticed this and breathed a sigh of relief. They had enough strength to deal with a dozen or so primary knight-level monsters. The question was, how to keep these iron-swallowing beasts from escaping. Reality didn't give them time to think. The beasts launched their attack, leaping towards the group. The battle erupted instantly. The clang of metal against metal echoed through the tunnels. Brad slammed his shield into an iron-swallowing beast, sending it flying 10 meters back. It crashed against the rock wall with a loud bang, sending dust and debris raining down. But the beast simply shook its head and charged again, seemingly unharmed. Brad frowned. The other knights were also struggling. The iron-swallowing beasts' bodies were incredibly tough. Even swords and axes infused with dochi could only leave faint scratches. Only Kyi, as a high-ranking knight, could inflict significant damage. If not for the narrow tunnels that limited the beasts' movements, preventing them from utilizing their agility and speed, the fight would be even more difficult. The battle was not as easy as they had anticipated, and they were quickly locked in a stalemate. Just then, Sunan made his move. He chanted a strange incantation, pointed a finger, and a basketball-sized ball of acid materialized at his fingertip. It shot out, striking an iron-swallowing beast squarely in the face. Sizzle! The beast's face erupted in acrid white smoke as it thrashed on the ground, trying to rub off the corrosive liquid. There were no weak offensive spells. Although Acid Splash was only a zero-ring spell, its corrosive power was more terrifying than Aqua Regia. An egg-sized ball of acid was enough to completely dissolve an adult human male, leaving no trace behind. Even with their tough bodies, the iron-swallowing beasts wouldn't be able to withstand such an attack to a vital area. Swish! A figure darted forward, thrusting his sword into the wound on the beast's face. With a burst of force, the beast's head exploded. Its headless body swayed for a moment before collapsing. Kyi withdrew his sword, glancing at Sunan in surprise. The other knights were also shocked. They had experienced firsthand how tough the iron-swallowing beasts' bodies were, comparable to real black rock iron. Yet, in just a few breaths, half of the beast's head had been corroded away. What terrifying power was this? What would happen if a flesh and blood body was hit by such an attack? Just imagining the scene made their scalps tingle. So this is a wizard. Chapter 11, Puppet Creation. While everyone was stunned by Sunan's swift and decisive action, he himself wasn't entirely satisfied. If my spiritual power were a bit higher, that acid splash would have killed the iron-swallowing beast, he thought with a hint of regret. He pointed again, and another acid splash shot out, hurtling towards a beast like an arrow. Sizzle! Although the beast dodged in time, the acid still struck its side, corroding a large chunk of its flank. Its movements were visibly hampered. Seizing the opportunity, Kyi dashed forward, slicing the beast in half with his sword. The brothers worked together seamlessly, quickly taking down 4 iron-swallowing beasts. Their success bolstered the morale of the others. The remaining beasts, sensing danger, began to retreat. Don't let them escape. Stop them! Kyi shouted. The knights charged towards the fleeing beasts. Sunan narrowed his eyes, targeting the last beast in the group with a sleep curse. To his surprise, the beast remained unaffected. The spell didn't work. Sunan was taken aback. Just then, a beast suddenly leaped, seemingly merging into the rock wall and vanishing. The movement was so fluid that no one had time to react. The other beasts followed suit, disappearing into the walls one after another. As the last beast prepared to escape, Sunan snapped out of his daze. A faint light flickered in his eyes. The beast's graceful leap abruptly halted, its body frozen mid-air as if held by an invisible force. It struggled in vain, unable to break free. Kill it! Sunan commanded. The others, who had been staring in disbelief at this bizarre scene, finally reacted, attacking the immobilized beast. Crack! The beast's body shattered in mid-air. Sunan, you just... Kyi looked at Sunan, his eyes filled with wonder. While the inferior dragon blood potion was within his understanding, the magical feats Sunan had just displayed were beyond his comprehension. Sunan, knowing what his brother wanted to ask, calmly explained, "It's a spell." A spell. The others pondered this word, feeling as if a whole new world was unfolding before their eyes. Sunan, paying no attention to the others, hurried over to the remains of a bisected iron-swallowing beast and crouched down to examine it. Moments later, a strange expression crossed his face. Is something wrong? Kyi asked, noticing Sunan's expression. Sunan shook his head and stood up. I think I know where these iron-swallowing beasts came from. He had already suspected something was amiss when the sleep curse failed to take effect. There were generally only 2 situations where a creature could be immune to a spell. One was having sufficiently high spell resistance, such as dragons. Dragons were known for their innate spell resistance. Adult dragons could be immune to all spells below the 3rd ring. The other was a creature whose life form made them immune to a particular spell. For example, elemental creatures, undead creatures, and puppet creations were all immune to sleep curse. The iron-swallowing beasts clearly fell into the latter category. I initially thought they were metal-based life forms, but it turns out they are puppet creations. During his examination, Sunan had discovered enchantment runes within the beast's remains. Naturally born creatures wouldn't have such runes. The only explanation was that the iron-swallowing beasts were artificially created. And the only ones capable of creating puppets were wizards, or apprentices. There's most likely a wizard's legacy deep within this mine. Sunan was ecstatic. He had originally planned to search for a wizard's legacy after being promoted to a level 2 wizard apprentice, but he never expected to find one near Black Rock City. This was an incredible surprise. As Sunan explained his findings, Kyi and the others were shocked. They never imagined that these iron-swallowing beasts, with their knight-level combat strength and ability to burrow into walls, were actually puppets created by a wizard. Magical potions, terrifying spells, powerful puppet creations, all these things that were unimaginable to ordinary people were actually the work of wizards. What kind of group were they? The more they learned, the more they felt the mystery and power of wizards. Legend had it that thousands of years ago, wizards ruled the entire continent, creating an unprecedented golden age. They used to think it was just a myth, but now it seemed that it might have been a real event. Lost in their thoughts, the tunnel fell silent. Sunan, paying no mind to the others, sat down on the ground and began meditating to recover his spiritual power. He had expended nearly all of it in the previous battle. Considering there might be more battles ahead, it was best to recover before continuing their exploration. About 2 hours later, Sunan finished meditating. The group continued their advance. Fear stemmed from the unknown. Now that they knew the origin of the iron-swallowing beasts, their fear of these monsters diminished significantly. Especially after killing 5 of them in the previous battle, their morale was at an all-time high. However, to their confusion, they didn't encounter any more beasts as they progressed. Where did those monsters go? Horton wondered, smacking his lips. Kyi also frowned. If the remaining beasts were simply hiding, there was nothing they could do. Trying to find a group of wall-burrowing beasts in these dimly lit, intricate tunnels was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Sunan pondered. High-level puppets possessed self-awareness and artificial intelligence comparable to humans, but the iron-swallowing beasts were clearly not among them. They were low-level puppets, likely following a specific set of instructions. For example, when encountering an enemy they couldn't defeat, they prioritized self-preservation. This explained why previous lords had failed to exterminate them. Faced with a group of cunning monsters who were experts at hide and seek, even a great knight would be helpless. However, just because previous lords were helpless didn't mean Sunan was. He closed his eyes, concentrating on sensing the energy particles in the air. If he wasn't mistaken, these iron-swallowing beasts were likely guardians of the unknown wizard legacy hidden within the mine. If they could find the location of the legacy, the beasts would surely appear to stop them, and then they could annihilate them all. And the place where the wizard's legacy was located would definitely have a much higher concentration of energy particles than other places. As long as they followed the areas with higher energy particle concentration, they would likely find their target. Soon, Sunan opened his eyes and pointed to the tunnel on the right. This way. Kyi was momentarily stunned, then immediately reacted, leading the way without hesitation. The others followed closely behind. Along the way, the group stopped and started. Every time they encountered a fork in the road, Sunan would stop to sense the energy particles and decide the direction to proceed. After an unknown amount of time, they suddenly stopped. This time, it wasn't because they encountered any monsters or found a fork in the road, but because there was no more road. To be precise, a dark, heavy door blocked the tunnel. The closed door sealed off the entire passage. Chapter 12, The Wizard's Legacy. The heavy, black iron door was engraved with strange patterns, intertwined and radiating an air of profound mystery. Kyi and the others were baffled, but Sunan recognized the patterns at a glance. Enchantment runes. The structure of the runes wasn't complex, they seemed to be a simple magic trap. If anyone touched the door, it would trigger an alert and attack the intruder. However, the runes were dim and lifeless, clearly deactivated, likely due to the erosion of time. Even the most intricate enchantment runes couldn't withstand the relentless passage of time. Is that iron door the entrance to where the iron-swallowing beasts are made? Kyi looked at Sunan, who nodded and added a warning, "Be careful, those beasts won't just let us in." As if to echo his words, as soon as he finished speaking, iron-swallowing beasts emerged from the rock walls on both sides of the door, lunging towards them with ferocious growls. Prepared for this, the knights shouted and met the attack head-on. Only Brad stepped back, positioning himself in front of Sunan with his massive shield. Having witnessed Sunan's abilities, they understood that he was their main weapon against the beasts and prioritized his safety. Sunan chanted a strange incantation, but this time, instead of acid splash, he cast Mage Hand. 10 meters away, an iron-swallowing beast leaping towards Kyi suddenly froze mid-air, its limbs flailing as it struggled against the invisible force holding it. Kyi's eyes lit up. Seizing the opportunity, he dashed forward, his sword flashing. He struck the beast's neck repeatedly, finally severing its head. The headless beast crashed to the ground, lifeless. Compared to the single-target acid splash, Mage Hand, although less powerful, had a longer duration, making it perfect for assisting Kyi in killing the beasts. Fortunately, low-level puppets aren't very intelligent. They don't understand the principle of killing the fragile spellcaster first. Otherwise, if they swarmed me, Brad alone wouldn't be able to hold them off, Sunan thought to himself. Of course, if the iron-swallowing beasts weren't puppets, he wouldn't be limited to Acid Splash and Mage Hand. A single flash spell would blind these creatures, who were accustomed to the darkness and highly sensitive to light, rendering them helpless. With their coordinated efforts, the iron-swallowing beasts fell one after another. As Sunan had guessed, their mission was to guard the iron door. Therefore, despite suffering heavy casualties, they showed no signs of fleeing. 10 minutes later, with a final crack, the last beast was cut in half, its body falling to the ground. All 20 or so iron-swallowing beasts were annihilated. Looking at the ground littered with black rock iron fragments, Kyi couldn't contain his excitement and joy. Before coming here, he never imagined that the biggest threat of the black rock mine could be eliminated so easily. And it was all thanks to Sunan. Looking at Sunan's back, Kyi couldn't help but sigh with emotion. When Sunan had declared his intention to become a wizard, he had thought Sunan was being foolish, believing in the fantastical tales he read in books. But now, not only had Sunan succeeded, but he had also become so powerful, wielding a variety of extraordinary abilities that were truly awe-inspiring. Kyi was even a little envious. When they returned to the castle, should he try to walk the path of a wizard as well? Sunan, unaware of Kyi's thoughts, hurried to the iron door for a closer look. As expected, the magic trap on the door was indeed deactivated. He called 2 knights over, and together they pushed open the heavy door. Rumble! The door slowly opened, sending dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. As the dust settled, the scene behind the door gradually came into view. It was a vast hall, about 400 or 500 square meters in size. The entire hall was paved with square, grey stone bricks, covered in a thick layer of dust. There were messy footprints and what appeared to be animal tracks. It was clear that this hall was where the iron-swallowing beasts usually resided. There were 3 open stone doors at the back of the hall, leading into dark, unseen chambers. Several knights entered each chamber with their torches, ensuring there was no danger before Sunan and Kyi followed. The first chamber appeared to be a warehouse, incredibly spacious and filled with stacks of black rock iron. Not raw ore, but refined ingots. Everyone stared at the countless ingots, their expressions stunned. "We've struck it rich," Horton muttered, his eyes glued to the black rock iron, swallowing hard. No one mocked his loss of composure, they all shared the same sentiment. Even Kyi was dumbfounded, his face a mixture of shock, ecstasy, and disbelief. Black rock iron was as hard as refined iron but much lighter, making it even more expensive. The black rock iron before them was worth a fortune, at least 6,000 or 7,000 gold coins. This was almost equivalent to 10 years of tax revenue for Black Rock City. How could such a windfall not make them ecstatic? Only Sunan wasn't overly fixated on the gold. Although surprised, he quickly regained his composure and moved on to the next chamber. The second chamber was slightly smaller, filled with various tools, including a blacksmithing furnace, molds, and even a bellows. However, the most eye-catching object was the massive stone table in the center of the room, over 3 meters long and nearly 2 meters wide. It was covered in messy cut marks. Sunan glanced at the pile of black rock iron in the corner and immediately understood. This was likely the laboratory where the wizard apprentice had created the puppets. He had already ruled out the possibility of the owner being a formal wizard. Both the strength of the iron-swallowing beasts and the level of the magic trap on the door indicated that the owner was at most a wizard apprentice, far from reaching the level of a formal wizard. If it were a formal wizard, they wouldn't have been able to get past the guardians and enter this place. With these thoughts in mind, Sunan quickly searched the entire room. To his disappointment, apart from the tools and ingots, he found nothing else of value. Shaking his head, he left the room and entered the third chamber. Compared to the previous 2, this chamber was smaller but more comfortably furnished. In addition to a small bed and a desk, there was also a bookshelf, indicating that this was a study. Sunan's gaze fell on the bookshelf filled with books, his eyes lighting up. Chapter 13, Wizards Seek Truth, Not Immortality. If one were to ask what the most valuable thing in a wizard's legacy was, knowledge would undoubtedly be one of the answers. Suppressing his excitement, Sunan hurried to the bookshelf, his eyes scanning the titles. Graphic Design, Material Science, Life Energy Structure, Fundamentals of Enchantment Runes, Principles of Puppet Mechanics, Basic Puppet Construction, Puppets and Golems. Over 80% of the books were related to puppet creation. It was clear that the owner of this place was passionate about this craft, even obsessed. No wonder he created puppet creatures like the iron-swallowing beasts. But where did this wizard apprentice go? Sunan had a vague guess. He turned and walked towards the desk. The surface of the solid wood desk was covered in a thick layer of dust, bare of any items. Sunan opened the drawers. The first few were empty, but the last one contained 2 diaries, a ring, and 2 boxes. He took out the top diary and opened the cover. On the slightly yellowed first page, there was only a single line of writing. Anger MacLean, recorded in the Starlight Calendar Year 1124. Starlight Calendar Year 1124, which was about 125 years ago. The appearance of the iron-swallowing beasts in the Black Rock mine seems to have been a little over 100 years ago. Sunan pondered, continuing to turn the pages. The paper of the diary was of an unknown material, managing to remain intact after all this time. Starlight Calendar Year 1124, April 12. Today I completed the exploration of the Black Rock iron vein. As I guessed, the reserves of this vein are very rich. Now I have plenty of materials for my puppet experiments. This is great news. I've decided to build a laboratory deep in the mine as my future retreat. Starlight Calendar Year 1126, February 8. The Black Rock Panther experiment has finally achieved a key breakthrough. Soon, I will be able to successfully create my own puppet creature. So those puppets are called Black Rock Panthers, Sunan raised an eyebrow. Starlight Calendar Year 1127, March 15. Ha ha ha, success! I finally successfully created the first Black Rock Panther. This is my own unique puppet creature. I am indeed a genius. However, the Black Rock Panther's combat power is still not good enough. It's quite a bit weaker than a formal knight. There are still many areas that can be improved, and I need to collect more combat data. There are just a lot of knights outside. Let them be the Black Rock Panther's opponents. They are truly a lucky bunch. Starlight Calendar Year 1128, June 10. The improvement experiment is going well. The Black Rock Panther now has a combat power comparable to that of a primary knight. Unfortunately, that cowardly lord abandoned this mining area. I have to find a new target to provide combat data. Perhaps the black scale lizards in the north are a good option. Each page of the diary didn't contain much, only 2 or 3 sentences. And the time spans were relatively large, with the shortest interval being more than half a year. Most of the later content was about the progress of the Black Rock Panther improvement experiment. Occasionally, there were mentions of meditation, spell learning, and going out to collect materials. From the words, it was not difficult to see that this wizard apprentice named Anger was somewhat arrogant and reclusive, not liking to interact with the outside world. It was worth mentioning that he was also a level 3 wizard apprentice. In the Starlight Continent, an elemental wasteland with scarce resources, it had to be said that Anger was indeed a genius, having the capital to be arrogant, to be promoted to a level 3 wizard apprentice before the age of 100. However, as he grew older, Anger gradually shifted his focus from puppet research to cultivation, and the tone in the diary visibly became more anxious and confused. Starlight Calendar Year 1162, September 20. The increase in spiritual power seems to have reached a bottleneck. There has been no significant growth for more than half a year. Perhaps I should use some external force. Starlight Calendar Year 1163, January 4. I'm in luck. I found a formula for the Nightmare Potion. If I can make the Nightmare Potion, it will definitely solve the problem of spiritual power not increasing. Starlight Calendar Year 1165, May 19. Damn it! Why can't I find all the materials on the formula? I've already found the habitat of the materials according to the records in the book, but why can't I find them? Could the records in the book be wrong? Starlight Calendar Year 1167, February 6. So that's it. The elements are lost, the concentration of energy particles has decreased sharply. The continent we are on has become a Jedi. No wonder I haven't encountered other wizard apprentices for so many years. No, I won't give up like this. If I can't find the materials, I will try other substitutes. I don't believe that I can't solve the problem with my wisdom. Starlight Calendar Year 1169, April 4. Experiment failed. Starlight Calendar Year 1170, February 9. Experiment failed. Repeated experiment failure records. Starlight Calendar Year 1192, March 16. No matter how much I extract and purify low-level materials, the effect can't reach the point of replacing high-level materials. This potion simply can't be made successfully. Damn it! I'm not reconciled. The content of the next dozen or so pages was filled with resentment and curses towards this world, as well as unwillingness, bitterness, and despair towards the invisible path ahead. It wasn't until after the Starlight Calendar Year 1200 that Anger seemed to come to his senses, and the words between the lines regained their calmness. Starlight Calendar Year 1200, December 3. I can feel my life force gradually fading. It seems that I won't be able to live much longer. If I undergo biomodification, I might be able to live a little longer, but this is not my forte, and I don't want to turn myself into something neither human nor ghost for the sake of survival. No, perhaps it's just because that kind of transformation would make me completely lose hope of being promoted to a wizard. If I can't be promoted to a wizard, what's the use of living longer? What wizards seek is truth, not immortality. Starlight Calendar Year 1202, May 5th. Death is getting closer and closer. I seem to be able to smell the decay of my body. The good news is that I found the legend of the Star Tower in an ancient book. It is said that it is a legacy left by ancient wizards. Perhaps I can find a way to be promoted to a wizard there. This is my only hope now. I've decided to go and find the Star Tower. Star Tower. Sunan's expression changed. In his few memories of the game from his previous life, the Star Tower seemed to be one of the only 3 wizard legacies in the Starlight continent in version 1.0. Not a laboratory left by a wizard apprentice like this one, but a legacy left by a true wizard. It was the last bit of goodwill left to this continent by the wizards who had embarked on an expedition to the multiverse 1,000 years ago. It went without saying that there must be a lot of precious knowledge and materials in such a place. If he could find the Star Tower, being promoted to a wizard would definitely no longer be a problem. Sunan was excited and quickly turned to the next page, but what he saw was a blank page. It's gone. Sunan continued to flip through, but the rest of the pages were all blank. Obviously, after Anger McLean went out to search for the Star Tower, he never came back. He didn't know if Anger had found the Star Tower in the end. Sunan guessed that the answer was probably no. Otherwise, in the past 50 years, this laboratory wouldn't have remained untouched. Thinking of this, Sunan couldn't help but sigh. With Anger McLean's talent and aptitude, if he had been born in the era of wizards 1,000 years ago, he would definitely have become a powerful wizard. Unfortunately, he was born in the wrong era and could only waste his life, dying with regret. A Jedi for Wizards. Chapter 14, Bloodvine Ring and Spirit Nourishing Grass. Sunan sighed and shook his head, putting those thoughts aside. No matter what, armed with the synthesis cube and the player panel, he wouldn't meet the same end as Anger McLean. Setting down the diary, he picked up the other one. To his delight, it contained Anger McLean's experimental records on the Black Rock Panthers, detailing the entire creation process. With this, and after I unlock the puppet creation skill from those books, I can try making Black Rock Panthers myself. A joyful smile spread across Sunan's face. The Black Rock Panthers were night-level puppets, loyal, fearless, and excellent combatants. Having a group of them would provide invaluable protection when he ventured out to gather materials. He put away both diaries and picked up the ring. The dull grey ring looked like a cheap trinket, completely unremarkable. But to Sunan's senses, it was like a miniature black hole, constantly absorbing ambient energy particles. A magic item. His eyes lit up. He hadn't expected Anger McLean to leave behind a magic item. Sunan glanced back, confirming the others were still outside, then discreetly opened the synthesis cube and placed the ring inside. A line of text appeared. Bloodvine Ring, alchemy/minor magic item upon activation, summons bloodvines to bind a target, continuously draining a small amount of their energy. Can be used 3/3 times. Recharges by absorbing ambient energy particles or by infusing with spiritual power. Not bad, very practical. Sunan nodded in approval. Magic items had different ranks. The lowest was alchemy, also known as minor magic items. These usually had a single enchantment, such as dimensional bags, spatial rings, and weapons enchanted with sharpness, bleeding, or black steel properties. Despite being the lowest rank, their effects were significant. For example, Sunan estimated that even a peak knight would struggle to break free from the Bloodvine Ring's grasp. For a wizard apprentice like him, a minor magic item was an invaluable treasure. Of course, to use it, he needed to reach level 2, gaining the ability to manipulate energy particles to activate magic items. Above alchemy rank were glimmering, or low, magic items. These possessed multiple magical properties and were far more valuable. Even a level 3 wizard apprentice would be overjoyed to obtain one. Above glimmering was magic rank. These were true magic items, also known as wizard tools. Wizard tools usually had at least one activatable magical power, making them incredibly potent. Generally, only formal wizards possessed them. As for even higher-ranking magic items, Sunan doubted that any existed in the current Starlight continent. Even in the game, wizard tools above magic rank didn't appear until the 2.0 version, Return of the Wizards. I remember there were quite a few minor and low magic items scattered throughout the Starlight continent in version 1.0. I'll ask my brother to keep an eye out for them. However, unactivated magic items looked like ordinary objects to ordinary people, making them difficult to identify. Even with KYI's help, finding them would be challenging. Still, it was worth a try. Sunan put away the bloodvine ring and turned to the 2 remaining wooden boxes. He opened the larger one. Inside were 3 index finger long leaves. They resembled 4-leaf clovers, but they were entirely blue-purple and lustrous as gemstones. This is spirit-nourishing grass. Sunan recognized the leaves instantly, his eyes widening in surprise. He immediately placed them in the synthesis cube. Spirit-nourishing grass, purity 29.28%. After consumption, slightly increases spiritual power. The specific effect depends on the user's spiritual power. The higher the spiritual power, the weaker the effect. No effect for those with spiritual power of 12 or above. It actually increases spiritual power. Anger McLean was really willing to. He suddenly realized that as a level 3 wizard apprentice, Anger McLean's spiritual power definitely exceeded 12, making the spirit-nourishing grass useless to him. No wonder he didn't seem to value it. Well, more for me then. Sunan happily closed the box and opened the other one. Inside were over 30 sparkling gemstones. Sapphires, rubies, fire opals, halo stones, moonstone. Sunan marveled at the collection. These gems were easily worth over 1,000 gold coins. What a treasure! He decided to keep the gems. With the Black Rock Iron and the mine reopening soon, Black Rock City wouldn't be short of money for a long time. There was no need to sell these gems. More importantly, gems were valuable materials for wizards. They weren't just for aesthetics. In the hands of a wizard, they had many uses, such as serving as spellcasting mediums for certain spells. Sunan recalled a spellcasting school called Gem Magic, which utilized gems as mediums. This school was notoriously expensive. Each spell cast consumed a gem, costing a small fortune. Only wealthy wizards could afford it. However, the power of their spells was formidable. A first ring burning hand, cast with a ruby, could reach the power of a second or even near third ring spell. Therefore, practitioners of this school were known for being both incredibly wealthy and capable of fighting above their rank. Besides spellcasting, gems were also used in crafting magic items, most commonly wands. Inlaying different gems into a wand could imbue it with specific magical powers. Additionally, gems were often used as the energy cores of puppet creations. Many wizard apprentices who couldn't afford soul crystals would opt for gems instead. In short, gems had numerous uses. Sunan wouldn't sell them unless absolutely necessary. After checking the drawer, Sunan thoroughly searched the rest of the room, but unfortunately, he found nothing else of value. Oh well, I've gained plenty this time. I shouldn't be greedy. Sunan let out a long breath and left the room with his loot. While he was in the study, KYI had sent word to the soldiers outside, who were now busy transporting the Black Rock iron ingots. The hall was abuzz with activity. Seeing Sunan emerge, KYI didn't inquire about his findings. Instead, he gestured towards the laboratory. Do you want anything from inside? I can have it moved to your courtyard. No need, Sunan shook his head. Decades had passed, the magic traps had failed, and the puppet creation equipment inside was long broken. Repairing it would be futile. Besides, Anger McLean's experimental records included blueprints for the equipment. He could have the blacksmiths create a new set if needed. Chapter 15, Undercurrents. Golden Rock Province, Flashing City. As the central city of the barony, Flashing City was actually more prosperous than many of the central cities of Viscount Seas. Among the 7 baronies in Golden Rock Province, the Anist family's Flashing territory was undoubtedly ranked first. Both its land area and economic strength were not much inferior to those of a viscounty. Unfortunately, this also attracted the covetous eyes of powerful figures, leading to the barony changing hands. Inner Castle, Bedroom. After being dressed by a young and beautiful maid, Owen Anist went to the dining hall. Just as he sat down and took a sip of warm milk, he saw the secretary hurrying in. Lord Owen, the secretary bowed in greeting. Owen nodded. Seeing you in such a hurry, is there some urgent matter? There are a few things to report to you, my lord. Speak. Owen was concise, his hand still elegantly carrying out the motions of eating. Since inheriting the position of baron, he had paid more attention to his daily aristocratic demeanor, striving to integrate into the circle of noble lords. And through his efforts, and more importantly, with the support of Marquis Goldenrock, many noble lords had shown him goodwill. In time, his position in the circle of noble lords would only become more stable. And when everything settled down, it would be time to free his hands and completely eliminate any worries. Lord Zolf sent someone to deliver a letter, explicitly stating that he will attend the Harvest Festival in Flashing City this year, the secretary reported. Hearing this, Owen paused slightly, a knowing smile appearing on his slightly chubby face. It seems that Zolf has finally recognized the situation. Very good. What about Norwood and Devon? They haven't agreed yet, but they haven't explicitly refused either. They are most likely still watching. A hint of contempt flashed in Owen's eyes. Watching? Humph, do they think those two brats can still return to Flashing City? What a ridiculous idea. The secretary flattered him with a smile. You are right, my lord. The two lords will eventually realize that you are the true master of Flashing Territory. The true master of Flashing Territory. This title softened Owen's expression, and his mood improved considerably. Speaking of which, what are my two nephews up to lately? The secretary hesitated. I heard that they plan to reopen the Black Rock mine. Black Rock mine? Owen was slightly taken aback. He had heard about the past events of Black Rock City and naturally knew about the Black Rock mine, so he couldn't help but look puzzled. Do they have a way to deal with the monsters in the mine? I'm not sure about that either. The secretary glanced at Owen and carefully explained, Black Rock City has sealed off the mine, and my people can't find out the specific situation there. Seeing Owen frown, he quickly added, Don't worry, my lord. If they really reopen the Black Rock mine, my people will definitely get the news. Owen thought about it and decided not to dwell on this matter. He changed the subject. Is there anything else? The secretary hurriedly said, There is one more thing. Just yesterday, Earl Storm was attacked by the Spark Church while hunting and was seriously injured. Storm territory is now in chaos. Clang! The crisp sound of cutlery hitting the porcelain plate rang out. Hearing this news, Owen lost his elegant demeanor. He put down his cutlery, stood up, and asked solemnly, Seriously injured? How serious? The secretary hesitated. He has been unconscious for a day and a night and still hasn't woken up. Owen's expression changed slightly. From the sound of it, Earl Storm's situation was not optimistic. Owen sat back in his chair, his expression flickering. He didn't care about Earl Storm's life or death, he was more concerned about the subsequent impact of this incident. Earl Storm was one of the two most powerful earls in Golden Rock Province, second only to Marquis Goldenrock. Unlike Earl Winterfrost, who was close to Marquis Goldenrock, Earl Storm had always kept his distance from the Marquis, even appearing somewhat indifferent. To Marquis Goldenrock, who was trying to control the entire Golden Rock Province, Earl Storm's existence was quite an eyesore. Others might not know, but Owen did, that the relationship between Marquis Goldenrock and the Spark Church was not simple. He was able to seize the position of Baron Flashing because of the Spark Church's support. Perhaps Marquis Goldenrock was behind the attack on Earl Storm. After a long silence, Owen said, Continue to pay attention to the situation in Storm territory and report any information to me immediately. Also, have Farid take people to the borders of Norwood and Devon's territories under the guise of suppressing bandits. Golden Rock Province was becoming increasingly turbulent, and Owen was no longer willing to wait. He had to completely control Flashing territory as soon as possible. If Norwood and Devon were still being difficult, then don't blame him for using other methods. Time flew by, and the month of revival, March, arrived. More than 10 days had passed since the discovery of Anger McLean's laboratory. KYI sold the Black Rock iron in the warehouse through a secret channel and obtained nearly 7,000 gold coins. Apart from keeping some to purchase equipment for the army and improve the situation in the territory, he invested the rest in the reconstruction of the Black Rock mine. Everything was developing smoothly. Sunan didn't care about these matters. After returning to Black Rock City, he devoted himself to studying and cultivating as always, paying little attention to the outside world. After reading the books he brought back from the laboratory, Sunan successfully triggered the puppet creation learning progress. Compared to biomodification and potion making, puppet creation involved a wider range of knowledge and had a higher threshold. This skill not only included enchantment knowledge but also encompassed part of the fields of biomodification and magic item creation. Therefore, the learning progress of the puppet creation skill was slower. Even with the bonus from the inferior activity potion, after more than 10 days, the learning progress had only reached a little over 10%. Sunan estimated that it wouldn't be until the month of blazing fire, July, that he would completely master the puppet creation skill. On the other hand, his meditation and cultivation were progressing very smoothly. After returning from the Black Rock mine, Sunan used the synthesis cube to fuse the 3 pieces of spirit-nourishing grass that day. Star-patterned spirit-nourishing grass, purity 15.33%. After consumption, greatly increases spiritual power. The specific effect depends on the user's spiritual power. The higher the spiritual power, the weaker the effect. No effect for those with spiritual power of 20 or above. As expected, the effect of the star-patterned spirit-nourishing grass after being synthesized by the synthesis cube was even stronger than that of simply adding the 3 pieces of spirit-nourishing grass together. After consuming the star-patterned spirit-nourishing grass, Sunan's spiritual power directly surged by 1.87 points. This was almost equivalent to 2 months of meditation. Thanks to this, his spiritual power soared to 5.77. And the benefit of the surge in spiritual power was that the proficiency of the star ring meditation increased even faster. Meditation increased spiritual power, and the increase in spiritual power in turn improved meditation efficiency. The two complemented each other. Now, Sunan could increase the proficiency of the star ring meditation by about 10 to 12 points per day. At this rate, it should take him 7 or 8 months at most to construct the second star ring. But it could actually be even faster. Black Rock City's financial pressure is no longer that great. We can allocate more gold coins to buy materials to make the inferior activity potion, and then I can use the cube to synthesize a more effective potion. This way, the efficiency of meditation can be further improved. Chapter 16, Synthesizing a First-Order Potion. Gurgle gurgle. The sound of the boiling liquid gradually weakened and finally disappeared completely. Sunan picked up the beaker, poured the viscous liquid inside into a potion bottle, plugged it with a cork, and placed it on the table behind him. On the solid wood table, 15 potion bottles lined up in a row, shimmering with a captivating luster under the bright yellow light. Looking at the potions in front of him, a smile appeared on Sunan's face. These 15 bottles were the fruits of his labor over the past few days. The materials consumed for this cost over 150 gold coins. But it was all worth it. Steeling himself, Sunan placed the potions into the synthesis cube one by one. As the number of potions increased, the information displayed on the synthesis interface on the right also changed continuously. When the number reached 3 bottles, the synthesized inferior activity potion changed from 0 order/inferior to 0 order/intermediate. When the number reached 7 bottles, it changed again to 0 order/superior. Sunan continued, placing more inferior activity potions into the cube. Finally, when the 12th potion was added, the synthesis interface flashed, and the resulting potion was completely different. Activity potion, first order/inferior after consumption, greatly increases mental activity and extends meditation time. Duration, 30 days and 12 hours. No effect when stacked. User's spiritual power must be 5 or above. Compared to the inferior activity potion, the description of the activity potion added the word greatly to the increase in mental activity. In addition, it also added extends meditation time, which effectively improved meditation efficiency. However, what made Sunan frown was that the duration only doubled. The restriction on consumption wasn't unexpected. Most ranked potions had consumption restrictions. And the higher the rank, the stricter the restriction. This restriction was generally reflected in spiritual power. If someone with insufficient spiritual power forcefully consumed a potion, the consequences would range from mental confusion and soul damage to turning into some strange creature or even exploding and dying. After pondering for a moment, Sunan put the remaining 3 bottles of inferior activity potion into the cube. Perhaps because the number was too small, the quality of the synthesized potion didn't change this time. Seeing this, Sunan took the 3 potions out again and chose to synthesize them. In an instant, a bottle of activity potion appeared in his palm. Without hesitation, Sunan consumed it on the spot. He couldn't tell much just from the description of the effects, so he decided to experience the effect of a first-order potion personally. As the potion went down, Sunan felt his mind suddenly sharpen. The whole world seemed to become clearer, as if switching from low resolution to high resolution. Without delay, Sunan sat down on the spot and began to meditate. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly opened his eyes and immediately looked at the clock on the wall, surprised to find that nearly 4 hours had passed, and it was already dark outside. The meditation time has doubled. Sunan opened his panel and was delighted to find that his spiritual power had increased by 0.09. The proficiency of the star ring meditation had increased by 68 points. The increase in spiritual power is less than expected, but the efficiency of proficiency increase is almost 6 times higher than before. Sunan quickly calculated in his mind. The results of meditating for a month using the inferior activity potion were slightly better than meditating for 6 months using 12 bottles of the inferior activity potion. The difference wasn't particularly significant. But the time spent was vastly different. For a wizard apprentice with a limited lifespan, it was obvious which was more beneficial. This is the irreplaceable advantage of precious resources. They can increase spiritual power faster and allow for faster breakthroughs in rank. If I can keep using the activity potion, I can construct the second star ring in just over 40 days. In less than a year, I will definitely be promoted to a level 2 wizard apprentice. Sunan was overjoyed. After being promoted to a level 2 wizard apprentice, he would be able to use many restricted methods, and his combat power would also be greatly increased, truly giving him the power to establish himself in this world. Should I continue synthesizing to improve the quality of the activity potion? After hesitating, Sunan ultimately rejected this idea. Synthesizing would definitely not be a loss, but a higher quality activity potion would definitely have a higher requirement for spiritual power. It would be too wasteful if he ended up with a potion that he couldn't consume at this stage. Although Black Rock City's financial pressure had been greatly alleviated, he didn't have much money to spend freely. A first-order inferior activity potion is almost enough before I'm promoted to a level 2 wizard apprentice. Time entered the month of thunder, April, and the weather was still hot. The serfs in the villages around Black Rock City had finished their farming one after another, and the agricultural work was coming to an end. More manpower was gradually being transferred to the reconstruction of the Black Rock mine. It was expected that the Black Rock mine would be fully rebuilt by the end of the month. However, in order not to waste time, KYI decided at the beginning of the month to recruit miners and start mining in advance. Therefore, the Black Rock mine immediately started operating at full capacity. Every day, ore was transported from the underground mine to the ground and then put into the furnace, turning into square Black Rock iron ingots. The entire Black Rock City was enveloped in a lively atmosphere. Only the courtyard where Sunan lived was an exception, as quiet and peaceful as always. In the meditation room, Sunan, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly trembled slightly and then opened his eyes, revealing a joyful smile. I finally constructed the second star ring. In the depths of his sea of consciousness, 2 star rings intertwined, forming a chain-like shape, exuding a profound and mysterious aura. Sunan felt refreshed and happy as he opened his panel. Sunan Anist, human male, 16 years old. Spirit 10.85/Physique 5.04. Skills: Star Ring Meditation LV3, 28/10,000. Potion Making LV2, 629/3000. Biomodification LV1, 3/1000. Spiritual power increased by 1.21. Sunan nodded secretly. Originally, his spiritual power was only 9.64. With the successful construction of the star ring, it instantly broke through the 10-point mark. At this rate, when he constructed the third star ring, his spiritual power would definitely exceed 12 points, allowing him to be promoted to a level 2 wizard apprentice. Physique has also broken through 5 points. Sunan clenched his fists. He hadn't deliberately strengthened his physique, but with prolonged meditation and the increase in spiritual power, his physique had been subtly enhanced. It was estimated that by the time he was promoted to a level 2 wizard apprentice, his physique, even if not as good as a formal knight, wouldn't be far off. The proficiency of the level 3 star ring meditation has more than doubled, but with 10,000 proficiency points, I can max it out in half a year if I'm fast. Sunan's gaze swept across the skill bar and landed on biomodification at the bottom. This was a skill he had just mastered yesterday. Since he had potion making and puppet creation, Sunan had spent most of his time on these 2 skills, only occasionally taking the time to increase the learning progress of biomodification. However, the learning progress of this skill was already more than halfway there. After a few months of intermittent progress, it finally reached 100% yesterday, thus appearing on the skill bar. As long as I continue on the path of a wizard, I will eventually come into contact with the field of biomodification, and then this skill will come in handy. On the other hand, his spell learning was also progressing very smoothly. He had successively mastered the subsequently acquired unlocking technique, detect poison, and touch of fatigue. The first two were self-explanatory, their effects evident from their names. Touch of fatigue, however, was an offensive spell. It could inject negative energy into the target through touch, making them fatigued. Its practicality could only be said to be average. However, in the absence of other spells to choose from, Sunan learned this spell. I previously asked my brother to collect wizard books and magic items. I wonder how that's going. Chapter 17, The Best Mount. Leaving his courtyard, Sunan walked towards the main building of the inner castle. The patrolling soldiers he encountered along the way saluted and greeted him respectfully. To maintain secrecy, Sunan had asked his brother to suppress the news of him becoming a wizard apprentice. As a result, the ordinary people and soldiers in Black Rock City didn't know much about Sunan, only that the Lord's younger brother was reclusive and rarely seen. Only the knights who knew the truth were genuinely in awe of him. Entering the main building, Sunan went straight to the study on the third floor. Except when meeting with his commanders in the meeting hall, Kyi usually worked in his study or practiced at the training grounds. He should be in the study at this time. Just as Sunan stepped onto the third floor corridor, he saw a beautiful maid emerge from the study. Her disheveled appearance and flushed cheeks clearly indicated she had just been engaged in some strenuous activity. Noticing someone, the maid turned and was startled to see Sunan. Flustered, she hurriedly curtsied. "Young Master Sunan." Sunan gave her a knowing look. He vaguely remembered this maid was a widow. He hadn't expected his brother to have such preferences. "You may leave," Sunan said dismissively. The maid hastily retreated. Sunan paused at the door before entering. Kyi, already dressed, was sitting at his desk, engrossed in a book. Hearing the door open, he looked up and smiled naturally. "Oh, it's Sunan. What brings you here?" Sunan didn't comment on the situation, pulling up a chair and sitting down. "How are things going at the Black Rock mine?" "Very smoothly." Kyi's face lit up with a smile. "In just half a month, we've already earned over 100 gold coins by selling Black Rock iron. And this is just the beginning. Production will increase further. Once it stabilizes, we can earn at least 4,000 or 5,000 gold coins a year from the mine." A viscount's annual income was around 4,000 or 5,000 gold coins. For Black Rock City, a single city, to have a comparable income demonstrated the mine's incredible value. "What's the reaction from Flashing City?" Sunan asked. The activity at the Black Rock mine was too significant to remain hidden. Flashing City must already know about it. If Owen wasn't a fool, he wouldn't just watch Black Rock City grow stronger from the mine's resources. He would undoubtedly try to interfere. Kyi's smile faded, and he said thoughtfully, "The buyers of Black Rock iron are mainly lords and merchants from the Flowerthorn Duchy. They don't pass through Golden Rock Province, so it won't be easy for Owen to intercept." The Flowerthorn Duchy bordered the Astral Duchy, and its territory was adjacent to Black Rock City. Trading with them meant caravans could bypass Golden Rock Province, avoiding any interference from Owen. Of course, Owen could send troops to block the route. However, that would involve the Flowerthorn Duchy, potentially escalating the situation. Unless desperate, Owen probably wouldn't be so reckless. They still needed to be wary of other tactics, however. "I plan to form a cavalry unit," Kyi announced. Sunan raised an eyebrow, quickly understanding. The reason Owen was able to usurp the barony and suppress the other lords was his 500-strong elite cavalry regiment. Black Rock City would inevitably face Owen sooner or later, and they had to prepare. The best countermeasure was to build an equally powerful army. "That will be expensive," Sunan commented. Kyi nodded. "Purchasing war horses and armor will cost a lot." War horses and armor were incredibly costly in this era. Acquiring a warhorse and a set of armor would cost at least 30 or 40 gold coins. The ongoing expenses of training cavalry, raising horses, and maintaining equipment were even greater. Cavalry regiments were money pits, consuming a significant portion of many territories' income. That was why the size of a lord's cavalry was a measure of their strength. Even with the Black Rock mine, forming an elite cavalry regiment would be a strain on Black Rock City's finances. "In that case, I have a solution," Sunan said, his eyes gleaming. What is it? Kyi asked eagerly. Having witnessed Sunan's various magical abilities, he had complete faith in his younger brother. Hearing that Sunan had a solution, his heart filled with hope. Black Rock Panthers, Sunan said concisely. Kyi immediately understood and his eyes lit up. He had seen the combat prowess of the Black Rock Panthers. They were a match for knights. More importantly, these puppet creatures were fearless, tireless, and didn't require food or rest. If they could be used as mounts, they would be the perfect steeds. Can you create Black Rock Panthers? Kyi looked at Sunan expectantly. It shouldn't be a problem, Sunan confirmed. Thanks to the activity potion, his puppet creation skill had progressed rapidly and was now over 90%. In 4 or 5 days at most, he would master this skill. Then he could create Black Rock Panthers. That's fantastic. Kyi was overjoyed. He jumped to his feet and paced excitedly, speechless for a moment. A cavalry regiment mounted on Black Rock Panthers would be the strongest in Golden Rock Province. With such a force, even if it was only 300 strong, he would be confident in retaking Flashing City. In his excitement, Kyi looked at Sunan, feeling a surge of emotion. After returning from the mine, he had taken the Enlightenment book from Sunan, hoping to test his potential as a wizard apprentice. However, after reading just 2 pages, he was struck with a splitting headache and had to give up. He didn't have the aptitude. Kyi had been disappointed for days. But later, he realized it didn't matter. As long as Sunan was there, it was enough. With Sunan's support, they would surely revive the Anist family. After a while, Kyi finally calmed down and clapped Sunan on the shoulder. I'll leave this to you. If you succeed, you'll be a hero to our family. Sunan smiled faintly and changed the subject, bringing up the reason for his visit. Hearing this, Kyi slapped his forehead and laughed. I was just about to tell you about that. He got up from his desk and gestured for Sunan to follow. A while ago, I asked the Firefox Trading Company from the Flowerthorn Duchy to help find the things you wanted. They arrived in Black Rock City this morning and should be resting at the tavern now. Let's go see them. Chapter 18, The Firefox Trading Company. Walking down the street, Sunan was surprised to find that the city was much more crowded than before, bustling with activity. Many of the people were dressed in leather armor and carried weapons, looking capable and alert. Noticing Sunan's observant gaze, Kyi explained with a smile, after the Black Rock mine reopened, many caravans came here upon hearing the news. Many of these people are caravan members and their mercenary escorts. Sunan understood. The prosperity of a city often began with flourishing commerce. As long as the Black Rock mine continued to operate, it wouldn't be long before Black Rock City became one of the leading cities in Golden Rock Province. As they walked, Sunan noticed a makeshift shelter built with wooden frames and cloth. More than a dozen people were busy inside, some cooking porridge, others distributing it. A long line of ragged, emaciated people stood in front of the shelter, their eyes fixed on the porridge, their throats bobbing, their faces filled with anticipation. Under the watchful eyes of the soldiers, they waited patiently in line. Who are those people? Sunan asked Kyi. They are refugees from the Flowerthorn Duchy to the west. There's a war going on there, and many civilians have been displaced. I sent people to bring them here, planning to absorb them into the city. Sunan pondered this. In addition to income, population was also a crucial factor in a city's prosperity. Located on the border, Black Rock City had a small population, and its army numbered only a little over 500. This was an inherent weakness. If this problem wasn't addressed, Black Rock City would never be able to grow stronger, and forming a cavalry regiment would remain a distant dream. Taking in refugees was undoubtedly an excellent solution. Especially since the refugees who survived the long journey were mostly young and healthy men and women. After joining the territory and recuperating for a few days, they could immediately become part of the workforce. The young adults could even join the army directly, bolstering Black Rock City's military strength. Before winter comes this year, I plan to take the initiative and attack the Black-Scale Lizard tribe in the Redhorn Wilderness, Kyi continued, his eyes shining. By shifting the battlefield to the Redhorn Wilderness, Black Rock City can avoid further damage from the war. Sunan nodded in understanding. Although Kyi didn't explicitly say it, they both knew the more important reason. By obtaining more Black-Scale Lizard blood, Black Rock City could train more knights. They then talked about the recent events in Golden Rock Province. When he heard that Earl Storm had been attacked and was in a coma, Sunan was surprised. As a great knight and a powerful lord, Earl Storm must have had tight security. Yet, the assassins were still able to severely injure him. What was the Spark Church, exactly? Seeing Sunan's surprise, Kyi explained, the Spark Church is a mysterious religious group that emerged over a decade ago. It grew rapidly, spreading throughout the duchy in just 3 or 4 years. They operate in secrecy, their purpose unclear. It is said that they have connections with many nobles, yet they also assassinate nobles. It's quite strange. The more Sunan heard, the more he felt something wasn't right. With such a growth trajectory, could there be wizards, or apprentices, behind the Spark Church? Sunan tried to recall, but he didn't have a strong impression of the Spark Church. After all, when he played the game in his previous life, it was already version 2.0. Unless it was something very important related to wizards, he generally didn't know much about version 1.0. Lost in thought, he suddenly heard a commotion ahead. They had turned a corner and were now near the tavern. The tavern door was wide open, and boisterous noises could be heard from inside, with many people shouting loudly. Entering, they saw a drinking contest underway. 2 burly men sat on opposite sides of a round table, desperately guzzling down drinks, exchanging provocative glances. A dozen strong men surrounded them, cheering and roaring with excitement. Sunan's gaze swept over the crowd, landing on one of the contestants. The man was about 25 or 26 years old, with rugged features and incredibly thick body hair. His exposed arms, open chest, and most of his face were covered in hair. His eyes were ember, resembling those of a wild beast more than a human. Beastmen, Sunan muttered, the word slipping out unconsciously. Beastmen were originally the product of wizard experiments. Most of them were bloodthirsty, ferocious, and extremely aggressive. With the slightest external stimulation, they could easily lose control of their bloodthirsty instincts, transforming into beasts and attacking any living creature in sight. In ancient times, the first beastmen had caused the beast transformation disaster, resulting in countless casualties. It wasn't until later that wizards suppressed them. However, after many years of reproduction and bloodline dilution, later generations of beastmen were much more stable and could generally control their transformations. Beastmen couldn't cultivate breathing techniques, but their physique far surpassed that of ordinary humans. An adult beastman possessed the strength of an apprentice knight. Some beastmen with strong beast bloodlines could even rival formal knights after rigorous training. However, in contrast to their powerful physique, beastmen had much shorter lifespans and lower fertility rates than ordinary humans. Nowadays, beastmen were rarely seen on the continent. Even if there were any, they mostly lived within the Azure Gold Empire. Sunan hadn't expected to see a beastman descendant here. It's rare for someone to recognize Orda's lineage at a glance. You are truly knowledgeable. A voice suddenly reached his ears. Sunan turned and saw a tall man, about 40 years old, approaching with a smile. He wore an expensive-looking crimson fox fur coat. Lord Kyi, it's been a while. Reaching them, the man first bowed to Kyi, then looked at Sunan. May I know how to address you? Sunan. Sunan nodded slightly. He had already guessed the man's identity. This is my younger brother, Kyi introduced, then turned to Sunan. This is Mr. Muzhou Ismail, the owner of the Firefox Trading Company. Master Sunan, it's a pleasure to meet you. Muzhou shook Sunan's hand with a smile, feeling a twinge of curiosity. According to the information he had gathered, this second young master of the Flashing family was reclusive and preferred to tinker with strange things in his room, rarely venturing out. Such a person shouldn't have much exposure to the world and shouldn't be able to recognize Orda as a beastman at a glance. Moreover, the information also stated that Sunan didn't have the aptitude for knighthood, hadn't even started learning breathing techniques, and was physically weaker than the average person. But looking at Sunan now, with his upright posture, bright eyes, and energetic demeanor, he didn't look frail at all. What were those intelligence gatherers doing? They couldn't even handle such a small task. Muzhou frowned inwardly, determined to give those people a good scolding when he returned. Chapter 19, Energy Runes. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Kyi stated their purpose for visiting. Muzhou smiled and replied, How could I not take your request seriously, my lord? I've collected quite a few things. Let me show you. He then raised his voice and called out towards the center of the tavern, Orda, stop drinking and come here. Orda, the beastman, had already defeated his opponent in the drinking contest and was basking in the cheers and flattery of the surrounding crowd. Hearing Mu Zhou's call, he wiped his mouth and strode over. As he approached, his gaze briefly lingered on Sunan, his pupils seemingly contracting for a moment. Then he looked at Mu Zhou and grinned. "What's up, boss?" "Time to work," Mu Zhou said, pointing towards the backyard. He then turned to Kyi and Sunan with a smile. "Please come with me." The Firefox Trading Company's carriages and goods were stored in the backyard, guarded by more than a dozen fully armed men. Judging from their uniform attire and weapons, they weren't mercenaries but the company's own private soldiers. Sunan's eyes flickered. In this day and age, only large trading companies had the resources to train private soldiers. It seemed the Firefox Trading Company was quite influential. Following Mu Zhou's instructions, Orda retrieved a heavy wooden chest from one of the carriages and placed it on the ground with a thud. Opening it, they saw more than a dozen thick books and 5 small boxes. "These are the things you requested, my lord," Mu Zhou said with a smile. To his surprise, Kyi simply nodded without making any move to inspect the items. Instead, Sunan stepped forward, crouched down, and began examining the contents of the chest. There were 14 books in total, 4 of which were duplicates of one Sunan already possessed. This was unavoidable. Ordinary people couldn't understand the words in wizard books and couldn't be expected to differentiate between them when collecting them. Duplicates were inevitable. The remaining 8 books were also not the type that could trigger skills. But Sunan wasn't disappointed. Even if they couldn't trigger skills, it was always good to have more knowledge. After all, for a wizard, knowledge was power. Besides, with his player status, as long as he reached 100% reading progress on a book, he would completely master its knowledge. This alone gave him a huge advantage over other wizard apprentices. However, one book did pique his interest. Extraction and Modification of the Green Chameleon's Abilities. According to the preface, this book described how to extract the bloodline containing the color-changing ability from a lizard called the Green Chameleon and integrate it into a human body, granting the person the ability to camouflage themselves like a chameleon. An interesting experiment. Sunan set the book aside, planning to read it carefully later. He then opened the 5 small wooden boxes one by one. 3 of the boxes contained scrolls made of parchment. The moment he opened the boxes, Sunan sensed the fluctuation of energy particles emanating from the scrolls. Clearly, these were spell scrolls. Moreover, they all recorded first ring spells, freezing ray, mist cloak, and summon monster eye. Excellent! A hint of joy flashed in Sunan's eyes. His current spiritual power wasn't enough to learn first ring spells, but he could use first ring spell scrolls. Spell scrolls could be activated by injecting a small amount of spiritual power, making them usable by any wizard apprentice. Of course, if one's strength was insufficient, using a spell scroll of too high rank could easily result in being injured by the energy fluctuations it triggered. However, this wasn't a problem for first ring spell scrolls. These 3 spell scrolls could be quite useful in combat. After a moment of excitement, Sunan turned his attention to the remaining 2 wooden boxes. They also contained parchment scrolls, but instead of spells, they recorded other things. To Sunan's surprise, the first scroll contained the formula for the activity potion. Concentrated mind-clearing tree sap, nether python bone powder, 1000 soul grass, magic sound flower, these are all rare and precious materials. Sunan grimaced inwardly. It wouldn't be easy to gather all these materials in the current Starlight continent. It would take a lot of manpower and resources. Even if he wanted to use the cube to synthesize suitable substitutes, it would still require numerous experiments. In comparison, it was much easier to synthesize the activity potion using the inferior activity potion. The second scroll recorded a technique called energy runes. Sunan had some recollection of this. Energy runes were a branch of enchantment, involving manipulating energy particles to form runes with elemental properties, which could then be applied to oneself or other objects to imbue them with corresponding elemental effects. For example, applying a lightning rune to a weapon could temporarily grant it lightning damage and a paralyzing effect. Applying a gale rune to oneself could make the body lighter, greatly enhancing agility and flexibility. In essence, energy runes were a technique for temporarily turning ordinary objects into magic items or temporarily enhancing oneself. Since energy runes consumed very little spiritual power, after mastering them, they could be combined with close combat to unleash considerable power, making them highly practical in battle. In other words, it's an advanced technique for manipulating energy particles, requiring extremely high proficiency in energy particle control, which is why it requires at least a level 3 wizard apprentice to use. However, Sunan clearly remembered that in his previous life, some players had developed a special method that allowed level 1 and level 2 wizard apprentices to use energy runes. If he used this method, he might be able to master energy runes in advance. I'll try it when I get back. Sunan made up his mind, closed the box, put it back in the chest, and slowly stood up. Mu Zhou now understood that it was actually Sunan who wanted to collect these things, so he said with a smile, I hope these items meet your expectations, Master Sunan. They're not bad. Sunan nodded slightly, his expression betraying nothing, but inwardly he was very satisfied. Not to mention the books and spell scrolls, the energy runes alone made him feel like this trip was quite worthwhile. Kyi, seeing that his brother was satisfied with the items, called 2 soldiers over to carry the chest back to the inner castle. He and Sunan then bid farewell to Mu Zhou and left. Watching Kyi and Sunan leave, Mu Zhou fell into deep thought. Books and other items related to wizards were valuable collectibles. Many nobles had a hobby of collecting such things. But as far as he knew, the 2 brothers weren't in a good situation and shouldn't be thinking about collecting such things. After all, these items weren't cheap, a few dozen gold coins were enough to buy several sets of armor. But if not for collecting, why did Sunan want to collect these things? After pondering for a while without finding an answer, Mu Zhou shook his head, no longer dwelling on it. Turning around, he saw Orda staring intently in the direction Kyi and Sunan had left. What's wrong? He asked curiously. Orda hesitated for a moment. That nobleman named Sunan, he gives me a very dangerous feeling. Very dangerous? Mu Zhou's expression shifted. Due to his beastman bloodline, Orda had a beast-like intuition, able to vaguely sense whether someone posed a threat to him. But Orda, as his chief bodyguard, possessed the strength of a mid-level knight. For him to sense danger from someone, that person must be at least a peak knight. Although Sunan didn't look fragile at all, he didn't seem like a peak knight either. Mu Zhou was even more puzzled. Chapter 20, The Not-So-Practical Transformation Ability. In the spacious study, the bright candle light flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Sunan sat at the desk, engrossed in extraction and modification of the green chameleon's abilities. The chameleon was so named for its ability to change its skin color to match its surroundings. This physiological change was mainly achieved through the regulation of the autonomic nervous system, which expanded or contracted pigment cells in the skin. The green chameleon's camouflage ability was several levels higher than that of ordinary chameleons, almost reaching invisibility. Even standing in front of an ordinary person, it would be difficult to spot with the naked eye. The author of this book had extracted the green chameleon's camouflage ability, modified and enhanced it, and then transplanted it into a human body, allowing humans to acquire a similar ability. It was certainly an ingenious idea. However, in Sunan's view, the resulting transformation ability wasn't very practical. Firstly, the essence of this ability was to change one's external appearance based on the environment. No matter how fast the transformation process was, it still required time, inevitably resulting in a slight lag. Those with less keen senses might not notice, but a wizard apprentice would definitely spot the discrepancy. Ultimately, this ability was only useful against ordinary people or knights and had no effect on wizard apprentices. It was still quite different from true invisibility. True invisibility was a second ring spell, learnable by level 3 wizard apprentices. Therefore, only those who had no hope of reaching level 3 would consider this transformation. Secondly, physical modification wasn't something to be undertaken lightly. The human body was highly adaptable. Many wizard physical modification experiments used human subjects, but once a modification was performed, further modifications or bloodline fusions became exponentially more difficult. Therefore, although many wizards, and apprentices, didn't mind modifying themselves, they would do so with great caution. If it were up to Sunan, he wouldn't bother with this camouflage ability. However, the book still had some reference value and could be useful for similar experiments in the future. Putting the book aside, Sunan took out the parchment scroll on energy runes and spread it out on the table. He then opened the drawer and retrieved a few gemstones, placing them on the table. The reason energy runes required a level 3 wizard apprentice to cast was that they were entirely composed of energy particles, demanding precise control over those particles. Level 1 apprentices, who could only sense energy particles, and level 2 apprentices, who only had rudimentary control, naturally couldn't use them. However, if a medium was provided for the energy runes to increase their stability, even a level 2 apprentice with less refined control could use them. Many players in his previous life had used this method to utilize energy runes before reaching the required level. Gems were one of the few suitable mediums for energy runes. But this way, energy runes become single-use consumables, requiring a gem each time. That's quite a cost. Sunan picked up a gem, examining it under the candlelight. Even so, mastering a powerful combat technique was worth the cost of a few gems. Even someone as strong as Earl Storm had been critically injured by assassins. This world was far more dangerous than he had anticipated. To ensure his safety, the more combat techniques he mastered, the better. First, I'll learn this technique, and once I reach level 2, I'll immediately create energy rune gems. Having made his decision, Sunan focused on the contents of the scroll. Time flew by. 5 days later, his puppet creation skill finally reached 100%. A new skill appeared on his panel, puppet creation. Standing at the entrance of the laboratory, Sunan nodded in satisfaction as he looked at the brand new puppet creation equipment inside. After returning from the Black Rock mine, he had copied the equipment blueprints and asked the blacksmiths in the city to create the equipment. It had been completed and delivered to the laboratory a few days ago. Now that he had mastered the puppet creation skill, he could finally try creating Black Rock Panthers. More than 90% of a Black Rock Panther's body was composed of Black Rock iron, which was also one of the main materials. The other key material was the energy core. For this, Sunan chose to use gemstones. After all, he didn't have any soul crystals and didn't know how to create them. Even if he did, he couldn't create them now. Soul crystals, as the name suggested, were crystals formed from souls. Their raw material was purified souls. To create the lowest grade soul crystal, at least 1,000 ordinary human souls were required. Or dozens of night souls. Sunan currently had no way of obtaining either. He could only settle for using gems to create the energy core. With the complete experimental records and his newly acquired puppet creation skill, Sunan successfully created a Black Rock Panther on his first attempt. To his surprise, he could place the Black Rock Panther into the synthesis cube. Black Rock Panther, puppet/primary night level A puppet creature made of Black Rock iron, possessing the ability to move through Black Rock iron veins. Can replenish energy and recover from injuries by consuming Black Rock iron. It seems that non-living objects can also be synthesized and upgraded. Sunan nodded to himself. This meant he could use Black Rock Panthers to synthesize even stronger puppets. As for the ability to move through Black Rock iron veins mentioned in the description, Sunan had already read about it in Anger MacLean's experimental diary. He had been somewhat disappointed at the time, as he had initially thought the Black Rock Panthers possessed a more general earth tunneling ability. Well, if it really had that ability, it wouldn't be just a low-level puppet. Shaking his head, Sunan looked at the leftover Black Rock iron in the corner. Creating a Black Rock Panther requires about 5 tons of Black Rock iron. For the gems, I can use cheaper ones. The total cost is about 38 gold coins. This was enough to buy 2 or 3 good war horses. However, considering their combat strength, the Black Rock Panthers were clearly more cost-effective. Forget it, I'll let my brother worry about the money. I'll just focus on creating puppets. High-level puppets could automatically absorb ambient energy particles to replenish their energy and recover from injuries, but the Black Rock Panthers clearly didn't have this ability. Therefore, they could only achieve the same effect by consuming Black Rock iron. However, with the current energy particle concentration in the Starlight continent, Sunan estimated that even if he created high-level puppets, they probably wouldn't be able to absorb enough energy particles from the air. Chapter 21, Mu Zhou's Friendly Gesture. On the training grounds, more than 20 knights gathered, their eyes gleaming as they stared at the Black Rock Panther in the center, their expressions as eager as if they were looking at a beautiful woman. Every knight dreamed of owning a fine warhorse. Although the Black Rock Panther wasn't a warhorse in the traditional sense, it could serve as a mount. More importantly, this mount had the combat power of a primary knight. Wasn't that much better than a warhorse? How impressive it would be to ride one. They would be unstoppable on the battlefield. My lord, Master Sunan, can I have this Black Rock Panther first? Horton rushed towards Kyi and Sunan, his voice loud enough for the entire training ground to hear. The other knights immediately voiced their dissatisfaction. Why should you get it first, you drunkard? I'm a mid-level knight, I should have it first. Bah, I'm the best rider, it should be mine. That's riding a horse, this is a panther. It's all the same. Nonsense, I'm also good at riding women, shouldn't the Black Rock Panther be mine first? Seeing that they were about to start arguing, Kyi rubbed his temples with a headache and waved his hand. Silence! This Black Rock Panther will go to Brad first. Brad, who had been standing quietly to the side, was overjoyed by this unexpected reward. Thank you, my lord, thank you, Master Sunan. Horton and the others looked at each other, pouting but saying nothing. Brad was well respected among the knights and one of the strongest. Giving him the first Black Rock Panther was reasonable, and no one objected. As for Kyi, Sunan had already promised to create a more powerful Black Rock Panther for him later. Sunan tossed a necklace to Brad. This is the key to controlling the Black Rock Panther. As long as you wear it, the panther will obey your commands. However, it can only understand simple instructions. Understood, thank you, Master Sunan. Brad excitedly put on the necklace and, under the envious gazes of the others, mounted the Black Rock Panther and galloped around the training grounds. Kyi turned to Sunan and asked, how long does it take to create a Black Rock Panther? 3 or 4 hours. Seeing the joy on Kyi and the knights' faces, Sunan poured cold water on their enthusiasm. The materials for a Black Rock Panther are black rock iron and gemstones. The cost for one is about 38 gold coins. Kyi frowned but quickly relaxed. Compared to the increase in military strength, 38 gold coins wasn't much. As long as the Black Rock mine was operational, Black Rock City would have a steady stream of income. What Black Rock City lacked most now was military power. Only with a strong army could they protect the Black Rock mine, their source of wealth. Don't worry about the money, I'll handle it. I'll leave the creation of the Black Rock Panthers to you. Sunan nodded calmly. Currently, his days were spent meditating, creating inferior activity potions, and reading. He mostly replaced sleep with meditation. It wouldn't be difficult to spare a few hours to create a Black Rock Panther. Moreover, creating Black Rock Panthers also increased his puppet creation skill proficiency. As he created more and his skill level increased, the time required would decrease. This wouldn't take up too much of his energy. 2 months passed in a blink of an eye. In the month of summer haze, June, the rising temperatures scorched the leaves, and the sun beat down relentlessly. Despite the heat, the residents of Black Rock City were all smiles. With the reopening of the Black Rock mine, a large number of caravans were attracted to the city. The flourishing commerce had significantly improved the people's living standards. Although the city had recently taken in a large number of refugees, the Black Rock mine, the army, and the reclamation of wasteland had effectively absorbed them, greatly mitigating the impact on the city. Everyone could see Black Rock City thriving, their hopes for the future burning brighter. Incidentally, Sunan's birthday also fell in the month of summer haze. Although Sunan said it wasn't necessary, Kyi insisted on holding a birthday banquet for his 17th birthday. All the knights of Black Rock City, as well as representatives from several trading companies closely associated with the city, attended the banquet. Mu Zhou, the president of the Firefox Trading Company, even came in person, presenting Sunan with a precious gift, 12 rubies. Perhaps he had heard that Black Rock City was buying gemstones. In any case, this gift, worth over 100 gold coins, was the most extravagant among all the guests, surprising many. Sunan was also somewhat surprised. He could sense Mu Zhou's intention to build a good relationship with him, but he didn't understand why. Could it be that Mu Zhou had discovered his identity as a wizard apprentice? And did he understand the implications of that identity? Despite his doubts, Sunan didn't refuse Mu Zhou's goodwill and had a lively conversation with him during the banquet. I heard that old fox Mu Zhou likes to invest in promising young people. He probably already knows you're a wizard apprentice and understands the power that comes with it, which is why he gave you such a generous gift. After the banquet, Kyi and Sunan returned to the study and discussed Mu Zhou's actions. But the Firefox Trading Company has influence throughout the Flowerthorn Duchy and cooperates with many trading companies in the Astral Duchy. Befriending him will make it much easier for you to collect wizard books and materials. Indeed. Sunan nodded and glanced at Kyi. What's wrong? You seem distracted tonight. You noticed. Kyi smiled wryly, then his expression turned serious. My spies in Flashing City received intelligence that Zolf, Norwood, and Devon will all attend the Harvest Festival in Flashing City 3 months from now. Zolf, Norwood, and Devon were all subordinates who had followed Baron Anist on the battlefield and had been promoted to lords by him. However, when Baron Anist died unexpectedly on the battlefield and Owen seized the barony, these three, intimidated by Marquis Goldenrock's power, chose to protect themselves. It was precisely because of their silence that Owen hesitated and didn't immediately eliminate the two brothers. However, KYI wouldn't thank or forgive them for this. If it weren't for our father, those three guys wouldn't have had the chance to become lords. But they don't know gratitude and have now turned to serve that robber. Damn them! Compared to KYI's anger, Sunan appeared calm and collected. Except for Blackrock City, Owen now has complete control over Flashing territory. I think he'll make a move against us soon. KYI calmed down, his brow furrowed. What Sunan said was also his biggest worry. After thinking for a while, he quickly made up his mind, slapping the armrest of his chair and standing up. We can't delay any longer. In 3 days, we'll attack the Black-scale lizard lair and eliminate this closest threat. After 2 months of training, the cavalry regiment KYI had formed was starting to take shape. Although it numbered only a little over 60, it had 20 knights, and the rest were all apprentice knights. More importantly, the entire cavalry regiment was equipped with Blackrock Panthers as mounts. Although it was a bit rushed, with this cavalry regiment, KYI had some confidence in wiping out the black-scale lizards. Let's do it. I'll go too, Sunan said, standing up. If they postponed the attack until the month of books, August, when he would be a level 2 wizard apprentice, they could minimize their losses. But even if they could win now, the casualties would inevitably be higher. However, it wasn't certain. He still had the trump card of spell scrolls. With some luck, they might achieve a good outcome. Chapter 22, Attacking the Tribe. The Redhorn Wilderness was a barren land located over 200 kilometers north of Blackrock City. Vegetation was sparse, water sources scarce, and the landscape was dominated by jagged rocks resembling red horns, hence the name. Due to the harsh environment, the only intelligent creatures inhabiting the Redhorn Wilderness were the black-scale lizards. The scarcity of food forced them to invade Blackrock City's territory every winter, plundering resources and reducing their own population through conflict. The people of Blackrock City deeply hated this predatory tribe that brought them so much suffering. Therefore, when KYI ordered the surprise attack on the black-scale lizard tribe, the knights responded with fervent enthusiasm. I've had enough of those lizard bastards. Today, we'll wipe them out. Horton roared, his face flushed with excitement as he rode his Blackrock Panther. The other knights were equally eager for battle. Recognizing the importance of this operation, KYI not only deployed the newly formed cavalry regiment but also mobilized 500 soldiers. With ample funding, Blackrock City's army had expanded to 1,000 men, not including the militia. Their military strength had increased several times over compared to the previous year. The cavalry regiment led the way, followed by the infantry. The long procession of over 500 men marched across the wilderness. KYI and Sunan were positioned in the middle of the formation, each riding a Blackrock Panther. However, their panthers were larger and more robust than those of the cavalry regiment, their bodies gleaming with a deeper luster. Blackrock Panther, puppet/high-ranking knight level A puppet creature made of Blackrock iron, with a body tougher than Blackrock iron itself. Possesses the ability to move through Blackrock iron veins. Can replenish energy and recover from injuries by consuming Blackrock iron. These were elite Blackrock Panthers, synthesized by Sunan from 7 ordinary ones. Each possessed the combat power of a high-ranking knight, and their bodies were even tougher. Even weapons made of Blackrock iron could only leave faint scratches on them. KYI was clearly pleased with his mount. As they ventured deeper into the Redhorn Wilderness, the surroundings became increasingly desolate. After another half-hour of travel, the scouts returned. My lord, the black-scale lizard tribe is about 2 kilometers ahead. Excellent. KYI's spirits lifted, and he issued his orders in a deep voice. Everyone, increase your speed and prepare for battle. The procession accelerated. Soon, the black-scale lizard tribe came into view. Calling it a tribe was generous. It was a collection of crude huts made of straw and wood, surrounded by a flimsy wooden fence, radiating primitiveness. With over 500 soldiers approaching, the black-scale lizards, who weren't blind, naturally noticed them. By the time the army arrived, hundreds of lizards had gathered in front of the tribe, weapons in hand, their eyes filled with hostility. The black-scale lizards were a tribe of warriors. Even their women and children possessed combat strength comparable to that of adult human males. Adult black-scale lizards were as strong as knight squires. A few elites could reach the level of apprentice knights. And those who experienced atavism, awakening a trace of their dragon lizard bloodline, could even rival formal knights. Currently, there were more than a dozen knight-level black-scale lizards standing at the forefront, their scales marked with crimson lines, a clear sign of their awakened bloodline. The leader, nearly 2.5 meters tall and radiating a ferocious aura, gave Sunan a feeling similar to Kyi. Kyi had been promoted to a peak knight just last month. This meant that the black-scale lizard, presumably the tribe's chieftain, likely possessed peak knight-level strength. In addition, there were clearly over 200 black-scale lizard warriors wielding weapons. Although they were outnumbered, their individual strength was equal or even superior. Winning this battle wouldn't be easy. However, neither Kyi nor his knights showed any fear. Their morale was high. They had a wizard on their side. As they charged, the cavalry regiment unanimously took out potions, uncorked them with their thumbs, and downed the contents. Brute Force Potion. A zero-order potion that greatly enhanced strength. In preparation for this battle, Sunan had created over 60 potions, enough for each member of the cavalry regiment. With the Brute Force Potion, even apprentice knights could exert strength comparable to that of formal knights. Charge! Kyi roared, drawing his sword. Leading the charge, the cavalry regiment slammed into the black-scale lizard's defenses like an arrow. Blood splattered, and limbs flew. The battle erupted in an instant, quickly escalating into a fierce melee. The open space in front of the tribe became a bloodbath. This was the first true battle for the Black Rock Panther cavalry since its formation. And their combat strength didn't disappoint. Even if the black-scale lizards could block the cavalry's weapons, they were quickly torn apart by the Black Rock Panther's claws. They were facing not just individual cavalrymen, but coordinated attacks from both rider and mount. This was completely different from the cavalry they had faced before. The element of surprise resulted in heavy losses for the black-scale lizards. Sunan observed the battle from the rear, nodding in satisfaction. There seemed to be no precedent for taming beasts as mounts in this world. At least not in the Astral Duchy. Therefore, the Black Rock Panther Cavalry, an unprecedented type of military unit, easily caught their opponents off guard. And on the ever-changing battlefield, a wrong response often meant death. The Black Rock Panther Cavalry was still small in number. Once it expanded into a true regiment, it would surely bring a nasty surprise to Black Rock City's enemies. Sunan looked at Brad, who was guarding him, and sighed inwardly. He needed to become a level 2 wizard apprentice as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would always be a fragile mage who needed protection on the battlefield. Shaking his head, Sunan focused, chanting a strange incantation. A basketball-sized ball of acid materialized before him. With a flick of his finger, it shot towards a knight-level black-scale lizard. Mage Hand's range was too short for this battlefield, so he opted for acid splash. Sizzle! The black-scale lizard, completely unprepared for a ranged attack, was struck in the face by the acid. In an instant, a large hole was corroded into its face, its features dissolving, leaving only a gaping wound. Even the bone underneath was partially corroded. The lizard convulsed and fell to the ground, clearly beyond saving. The terrifying power of acid splash sent chills down the spines of the other black-scale lizards. They looked at Sunan with fear. They weren't afraid of human blades or fists, but this strange and terrifying attack was beyond their comprehension. What kind of power was this? Chapter 23, The Fire Child and the Mutant Monitor Lizard. Sunan, with an icy expression, continued to unleash acid splash after acid splash, targeting the knight-level black-scale lizards. In a matter of seconds, he had killed 7 of them. The black-scale lizards were already losing ground, and with Sunan's intervention, the situation became even more dire. The tide of the battle was turning decisively in Black Rock City's favor. Roar! Suddenly, a furious roar ripped through the air. The black-scale lizard chieftain had noticed the threat Sunan posed and decided to eliminate this human with strange powers. But before it could act, Kyi intercepted it. Lizard head, your opponent is me. Kyi sneered, slashing with his sword. The power of a peak knight, amplified by the brute force potion, produced an ear-splitting sonic boom. The chieftain's eyes narrowed. It didn't dare to face the attack head-on and hastily dodged, losing its chance to reach Sunan. Kiru wa ki. The chieftain let out a strange, shrill cry. Kyi initially dismissed it as a battle cry and was about to press his attack, but he suddenly sensed something was wrong and abruptly turned towards Sunan. A massive dark shape had emerged from the rear of the battlefield, charging towards Sunan at an alarming speed. Brad was the first to react. He whirled around, roaring as he charged towards the figure with his black rock iron shield raised. Boom! A deafening crash echoed as Brad was sent flying like a kite with its string cut. The dark figure merely stumbled back a few steps, shook its head, and recovered. Sunan finally saw the attacker clearly. It was a massive monitor lizard, 7 or 8 meters long, covered in tough, black, and red scales. I didn't expect these lizard heads to employ diversionary tactics. Sunan smirked, but his expression remained calm. He had noticed the creature before Kyi and Brad and was ready. A sleep curse shot out. This monitor lizard was clearly a mutant with an awakened dragon lizard bloodline. It had easily overpowered Brad, who was empowered by the brute force potion. Its combat strength was likely at the peak night level. Acid splash probably wouldn't do much and might only enrage it. Therefore, Sunan chose sleep curse. The charging monitor lizard suddenly faltered, swaying drunkenly. As expected of a mutant, it can even resist sleep curse. Sunan didn't hesitate. He took out the summon monster eye spell scroll and activated it. Instantly, a brilliant hexagram appeared on the ground a few meters ahead. As the light pulsed, a humanoid creature, less than a meter tall and wreathed in flames, appeared. It opened its mouth, letting out a childlike giggle. A fire child? Lucky me. Sunan smiled. Summon monster, as the name implied, summoned a creature from another realm to assist in battle. The strength of the summoned creature depended on the spell level, the caster's spiritual power, and luck. Summon monster I could summon creatures with strength ranging from mid-level knight to low-level great knight. The fire child was a creature from the plane of fire, with combat power roughly equivalent to a peak knight. Although he didn't summon a creature at the upper limit, a peak knight level creature was still a valuable asset. Following Sunan's command, the fire child cheered and rushed towards the still groggy monitor lizard, embracing it tightly. Almost instantly, the lizard's scales where the fire child made contact softened, shriveled, and turned to ash. Flames erupted, burning the flesh beneath with a sizzling sound. The intense pain instantly brought the monitor lizard out of its stupor. It let out a deafening shriek. It thrashed its massive body, rolling on the ground to extinguish the flames and dislodge the fire child. Then, it opened its maw, filled with sharp teeth, and lunged at the fire child. However, physical attacks had little effect on the elemental fire child. The teeth passed right through it, causing minimal damage. Instead, the monitor lizard burned its mouth on the flames, roaring in pain. The fire child giggled and pounced again. Burning Touch and Aura of Fire. These were the fire child's two abilities. Burning Touch inflicted severe fire damage to any creature it touched, even melting metal. Aura of Fire emitted scorching rays in a 10-meter radius, continuously inflicting burn damage to all creatures within range. Essentially, the fire child was a mobile source of intense heat. Unless one possessed magic items that could isolate heat, getting close meant enduring constant burning. The monitor lizard clearly had no way to counter the fire child. Its scales couldn't withstand the intense flames. It could only flee in a panic, a far cry from its initial imposing demeanor. Brad, finally recovered, got up and saw this. He stared in disbelief. What kind of monster was that? It was actually suppressing that terrifying lizard. Not far away, Kyi breathed a sigh of relief, marveling inwardly. As expected of Sunan, he always had unexpected tricks. The black scale lizards had made a grave mistake in choosing him as a target. He he he. The fire child's cheerful laughter intertwined with the monitor lizard's pained cries, echoing across the battlefield. Despite its best efforts to evade, the aura of fire inflicted constant torment. In a short time, the monitor lizard's body was covered in burns, not a single scale left intact. After extinguishing the flames on itself yet again, the monitor lizard finally reached its breaking point. It rushed towards Sunan, collapsing before him and looking up with pleading eyes, seemingly begging for mercy. It's quite intelligent. Sunan was amused. It was rare to encounter such a unique mutant. He didn't want to kill it, so he halted the fire child and cast a sleep curse. Weakened and injured, the monitor lizard couldn't resist. Its eyelids drooped, and it fell into a deep sleep. As a precaution, Sunan didn't stop there. He patted his black rock panther, instructing it to pin down the monitor lizard. Then, he placed his hand on the creature and cast Touch of Fatigue, draining its energy and ensuring it was completely incapacitated. Having done all this, he finally turned his attention back to the battlefield. The remaining black scale lizards felt a chill run down their spines. To their horror, the terrifying creature of flames charged towards them with a gleeful cry. Chapter 24, A Resounding Victory. The battle ended swiftly, within just 4 or 5 minutes. The fire child's arrival was the final straw that broke the black scale lizard's resistance. Wherever the little creature went, black scale lizards were turned into living torches, their bodies engulfed in flames as they fell and writhed on the ground, their screams echoing before they were reduced to charred corpses. Even the chieftain, powerful as it was, could only withstand the fire child's assault for a short while before meeting the same fiery end. The elemental fire child was the perfect counter to the black scale lizards, who relied solely on their physical prowess without any chi. After the battle, everyone began cleaning the battlefield. Those who passed by Sunan couldn't help but steal glances at him, their eyes filled with awe. The fire child was terrifying, but Sunan, who could summon such a creature, was even more awe-inspiring. The soldiers who hadn't participated in the battle at the Black Rock mine were especially shocked. They never expected that the frail young Master Sunan would be so powerful. That strange and mysterious power seemed even greater than that of their lord. At this moment, they finally understood why the knights always treated Sunan with such respect. It was clearly the reverence they held for a powerful being. After today's battle, the news of me becoming a wizard apprentice probably won't be kept secret any longer, Sunan mused, noticing the soldiers' gazes. But he didn't mind. It was impossible to keep it a secret forever. With the increasing number of knights in Black Rock City and the activity of the Black Rock Cavalry, more and more people would inevitably investigate the reasons behind it. When that time came, he wouldn't be able to stay low profile even if he wanted to. There were still some elderly, women, and children among the black scale lizards, about 60 or 70 of them. Kyi didn't kill them all. Instead, he ordered them to be taken back to Black Rock City as prisoners, clearly intending to keep them as a continuous source of blood. The dead black scale lizards weren't wasted either. Their blood was drained and stored in special containers. The mutant monitor lizard was also captured. Compared to ordinary black scale lizards, it was undoubtedly a better source of blood. After all, it possessed true dragon lizard blood. On the return journey, everyone was in high spirits. Kyi couldn't hide his smile. This battle had completely eradicated the black scale lizard threat. And their losses were less than 50 men. Such a resounding victory was thanks to Sunan. He alone had killed 70 or 80 black scale lizards, including nearly 10 knight-level elites. This battle was a complete triumph. More importantly, from now on, Black Rock City would have a steady supply of materials for creating inferior dragon blood potions. Kyi could already envision the number of knights in Black Rock City skyrocketing. The triumphant return of the army was met with enthusiastic cheers from the citizens. The sight of the captured black scale lizards further amplified the cheers. Some civilians, who had lost loved ones to the lizards, even threw stones at the prisoners. The soldiers didn't stop them, pretending not to notice, allowing the civilians to vent their anger. Back at the inner castle, Kyi instructed Old Geller to prepare food and wine for a celebratory banquet, a suggestion met with enthusiastic approval from the knights, especially Horden. The inner castle was filled with jubilation throughout the night. After the battle, Black Rock City returned to its path of development. Sunan also became busy. Besides meditation, he spent most of his time creating inferior dragon blood potions. Large quantities of black scale lizard blood were transported to his laboratory, and then transformed into potions. Almost every day, new knights were born in Black Rock City. It wasn't until the black scale lizard blood obtained from the battle was completely consumed and they switched to drawing blood from the prisoners that Sunan slowed down his potion production. However, by then, his attention had shifted to the mutant monitor lizard. The creature had incredible vitality. After 10 days of recovery, the burns inflicted by the fire child had completely healed. Sunan had a large cage made from refined black rock iron to hold the monitor lizard. To prevent it from escaping, he also cast touch of fatigue on it every day. Now, the monitor lizard cowered in fear whenever it saw him. Inside the massive metal cage, under the lizard's aggrieved gaze, Sunan, as always, drew a large tube of blood before leaving and locking the cage securely. The concentration of dragon lizard blood in the monitor lizard was higher than he had expected, reaching 18.35%. If he used the blood of ordinary black scale lizards, it would take more than 20 times the volume to synthesize dragon lizard blood of this concentration. With this concentration, it saves me a lot of time. Sunan looked at the row of containers on the lab table, filled with the blood he had drawn from the monitor lizard over the past few days. If he had relied on the black-scale lizard prisoners, it would have taken him a month or two to accumulate this much dragon lizard blood. This should be enough. Steeling himself, Sunan began synthesizing sub-dragon blood and then proceeded to create inferior dragon blood potions. Having created a large number of potions recently, his potion-making skill had already surpassed 2000 proficiency, and he was only a little over 800 away from reaching level 3. The success rate of creating inferior dragon blood potions had also exceeded 30%. For a level 1 wizard apprentice, this was an astonishing success rate. Half a day later, there were over 20 bottles of inferior dragon blood potions on the lab table. 3 of them even reached intermediate quality. Sunan placed the potions into the cube one by one. After adding the 3 intermediate and 5 inferior potions, the synthesized potion on the interface finally underwent a qualitative change. Dragon Blood Potion, first order/inferior after consumption, strengthens physique. The specific effect depends on the user's physique. The weaker the physique, the stronger the effect. Repeated use will weaken the effect. User's physique must be 5 or above. Excellent. A satisfied smile spread across Sunan's face. If he directly created dragon blood potions, with his current level 2 potion-making skill, the success rate would likely be in the single digits. Even if he got lucky and created one, the cost of materials would be at least 6 or 7 times higher. In comparison, it was clearly more cost-effective to create low-level potions and then synthesize them into higher-level ones using the cube. Without hesitation, Sunan synthesized the potions and immediately consumed one. His current physique was 5.61, just meeting the consumption requirement. A familiar heat surged through his body, reaching every limb and bone. It felt as if he was immersed in scorching magma, the intense pain mixed with an undeniable thrill. After a while, the sensation subsided. Sunan exhaled, feeling his muscles and bones become denser, a surge of power coursing through him. Checking his panel, his physique attribute had become 11.46. An increase of nearly 6 points. As expected of a first-order potion. Sunan beamed. In terms of physique alone, he was now almost on par with a mid-level knight. His physique even surpassed his spiritual power, which was 11.35. It seemed that compared to increasing spiritual power, strengthening the physical body was much easier for wizards and apprentices. The Star Ring meditation is only a little over 3000 proficiency away from reaching level 4. It should take a little over a month at most. The thought of being promoted to a level 2 wizard apprentice soon filled Sunan with excitement. Snapping out of his elation, he used the remaining inferior dragon blood potions to synthesize another dragon blood potion. He didn't plan to consume this one himself but intended to give it to Kyi. A person can take 4 or 5 dragon blood potions at most, after which there's no further effect. But this amount should be enough for Kyi to be promoted to a great knight. Chapter 25, Ascending to Level 2 Wizard Apprentice. Month of blazing fire, the time when the sun blazes relentlessly upon the earth. The scorching weather left people feeling drained and irritable. However, within the inner castle, there was an atmosphere of jubilation. After consuming 4 bottles of dragon blood potion, Kyi had successfully broken through to become a great knight. If knights were the backbone and elite force of a territory, then great knights were its cornerstone. In any country, great knights were undeniably high-end combatants. Having mastered Do-Chi externalization, a great knight on the battlefield was a tank-like behemoth, virtually unstoppable. With Kyi's advancement, the shadow cast over Blackrock City by flashing cities seemed to dissipate significantly. The joyous atmosphere outside didn't affect Sunan. With the Star Ring meditation just over 200 proficiency points away from leveling up, he had secluded himself in the meditation room, instructing others not to disturb him, and focused on preparing for his advancement. 3 days later, Sunan sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed. Deep within his sea of consciousness, energy particles flowed into the illusory form of the third star ring, filling the last vestiges of its insubstantial form. The moment the entire ring fully materialized, an unprecedented tremor surged through him, engulfing his consciousness. In the silent tranquility, Sunan felt as if he was drifting through the vast expanse of the starry universe. Waves of warmth washed over him, both internally and externally. The indescribable ecstasy of his life essence being elevated filled every corner of his being. After an unknown amount of time, Sunan gradually regained his senses and opened his eyes. The world before him seemed to have been wiped clean of a layer of dust, becoming much clearer. Is this the feeling of advancement? A surge of joy welled up within him. He quickly opened his panel. Sunan Anist, human male, 17 years old. Spirit 13.25/physique 12.02. Skills. Star Ring Meditation LV4, 3/20,000. Potion Making LV2, 2641/3000. Biomodification LV1, 527/1000. Puppet Creation LV2, 816/3000. Spiritual power increased by 1.27, slightly less than expected, but that's normal. After all, my original spiritual power was already close to 12. Physique hasn't changed much, only increased by less than 0.5. A genuine smile of joy bloomed on Sunan's face. From this moment on, he was a level 2 wizard apprentice. In the current Starlight continent, a level 2 wizard apprentice was undoubtedly a formidable figure. He had taken another solid step on the path to becoming a wizard. Taking a deep breath, Sunan calmed his excitement and began to explore the improvements brought about by this advancement. The most obvious change was the increase in casting speed. Spells like Mage Hand, Acid Splash, and Sleep Curse now had a casting time reduced by about a third. A mere 1 or 2 points increase in spiritual power clearly wasn't enough to produce such an effect. Sunan guessed that breaking through the 12-point threshold in spiritual power had triggered a qualitative change, leading to this significant reduction in casting time. Although it was only a third, in the ever-changing flow of battle, even a blink of an eye could be the difference between victory and defeat. For a wizard apprentice, casting time was equivalent to life. I'll have to wait until I'm a level 3 apprentice to learn metamagic techniques like Silent Spell and Instantaneous Spell. For now, reducing the casting time to about 1 second is probably the limit. The second change was in his control over energy particles. Snap! Sunan snapped his fingers, and a faint blue halo enveloped him. Moisture materialized out of thin air, drenching him from head to toe. Then, a fiery red halo appeared, and white steam rose as the water evaporated, leaving him feeling refreshed. With his advancement to level 2 and the qualitative change in his spiritual power, Sunan could now manipulate energy particles, utilizing their properties to achieve effects similar to spells. For example, using water and fire energy particles to clean himself. But energy particles could also be used in combat. Sunan extended his hand, and a blue light flashed in his palm. A crackling sound followed as tiny electric arcs materialized, dancing around his hand. The lightning then transformed into blazing flames, followed by a whirlwind, white frost, and eerie shadows, various elements appearing in rapid succession. A level 2 wizard apprentice could manifest energy particles into elemental forms for attack or imbue weapons or themselves with elemental properties. For example, imbuing a weapon with fire energy particles for fire damage, or imbuing oneself with wind energy particles for enhanced agility. The possibilities were endless. This was why level 2 wizard apprentices were far more powerful than level 1 apprentices. Even without using spells, their physical strength, combined with energy particle manipulation, was enough to overwhelm any knight. With spells, they could even face great knights head-on. Not to mention that level 2 apprentices could also use magic items and contract magical pets. Thinking of magic items, Sunan looked at the bloodvine ring he had been wearing on his index finger ever since retrieving it from the Black Rock mine. Previously, he could only sense the energy particles within the ring but couldn't utilize them. Now, with a mere thought, he could activate its magical properties. With its power, the bloodvine ring would be a valuable trump card. And energy runes. I can create energy rune gems now. I should also start thinking about a magical pet. Magical pets were a type of magical creature. They were originally ordinary animals, beasts, or mutants with special bloodlines, but after forming a contract with a wizard, they awakened special abilities and transformed into magical pets. There were 2 types, support and combat. Support pets were mostly fey creatures like fairies and sprites. These often possessed strong plant affinity, able to communicate with magical plants, making them excellent for tending magical gardens. Some were also used as lab assistants. Combat pets were much more diverse. From small animals like bats, cats, lizards, owls, snakes, and toads to powerful beasts comparable to knights, they could all be transformed into combat pets to assist wizard apprentices in battle. Some powerful pets could even serve as a wizard apprentice's trump card, their role not to be underestimated. The stronger the creature, the more powerful it becomes after transforming into a magical pet. I need to choose my first magical pet carefully. Wait. A thought suddenly struck Sunan. Speaking of suitable candidates, Wasn't there one right in his courtyard? The mutant monitor lizard. Sunan's eyes lit up. A mutant with dragon lizard bloodline, if transformed into a magical pet, would definitely become another powerful combat tool. It was worth a try.